She stood at the edge of ruin with a revolver in one hand and a desperate choice in the other. Eleanor Wade never imagined that hiring a drifter cowboy to save her father's ranch would lead to this, a kidnapping, a showdown with a ruthless cattle baron, and a love that burned hotter than the Colorado sun. This is the story of the ranch heiress who hired a stranger and found the man who'd save everything. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The wind that swept across the Wade Ranch on that cold March morning in 1885 carried the scent of coming snow and the bitter taste of desperation. Eleanor Wade stood on the wide front porch of the ranch house, her father's house, watching the dust rise from the road where yet another creditor's wagon had just departed. Her hands gripped the porch railing so tightly her knuckles had gone white. 23 years old, and she was drowning. The ranch that had been her father's pride, 12,000 acres of Colorado grassland timber, stands thick with ponderosa pine, and water rights to the clearest creek in the territory was bleeding money like a wounded animal. 6 months. That's how long it had been since Thomas Wade had collapsed in this very spot, his heart giving out as suddenly as a summer storm. 6 months of Eleanor trying to hold together something she'd never been taught to manage, something her father had always sworn would pass to a son he'd never had. Miss Wade! Eleanor turned to find her housekeeper, Mrs. Bridget Chen, standing in the doorway. The older woman's face was creased with worry, her Chinese heritage evident in her features, but her voice carrying the flat vowels of 20 years in Colorado. "The last of the applicants is here," Mrs. Chen said softly. "Should I send him away like the others?" Eleanor released a long breath. She'd interviewed 11 men that week for the position of ranch foreman. 11 men who'd either demanded wages she couldn't afford, looked at her with thinly veiled contempt for being a woman rancher, or worst of all, had clearly been sent by Arthur Calloway to spy on her operation. Arthur Calloway. Just thinking his name made Eleanor's jaw tighten. The cattle baron owned the 3 largest ranches surrounding Wade property, and he'd been circling her land like a buzzard since the day her father died. His offers to help came with strings-attached strings that looked suspiciously like marriage proposals wrapped in business language. "One more won't hurt," Eleanor said, though exhaustion weighed on every word. "Show him in." She moved into her father's study, her study now, though she still couldn't think of it that way. The room smelled of leather and pipe tobacco scents that reminded her achingly of Thomas Wade. His gun still hung on the wall, his maps of the ranch still covered the desk, his dreams still haunted every corner. Eleanor had just settled into the chair behind the massive oak desk when she heard boots on the hardwood floor. Different boots than the others, these made a quieter sound, more careful. She looked up as Mrs. Chen ushered in the 12th applicant, and everything changed. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway, but a way of standing that seemed almost apologetic for taking up space. His clothes were worn but clean. Denim trousers mended at the knee, a flannel shirt faded from too many washings, a leather vest that had seen better years. He held his hat in both hands, and his hair was dark brown, nearly black, falling just past his collar. But it was his eyes that stopped Eleanor's breath. Green. Not the muddy hazel of most brown-haired men, but true green like new spring grass or the heart of a deep forest. Eyes that looked at her with a directness that held no disrespect, only an almost startling honesty. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Name's Lucas Rourke. I'm here about the foreman position." Eleanor realized she'd been staring. She cleared her throat, grateful for the desk that hid how her hands had begun to tremble. "Mr. Rourke, please sit." He moved with the economy of someone who'd spent years in the saddle, folding his frame into the chair across from her. He didn't sprawl like the other applicants had, trying to claim territory. He simply sat waiting, his hand still holding that worn hat. "Tell me about your experience," Eleanor said, falling back on the script she'd used all week. 12 years, Lucas said. "Started as a wrangler in Texas when I was 14. Worked my way up through trail drives, worked ranches in New Mexico and Wyoming. Last position was assistant foreman on the Double R outside of Cheyenne." "Why did you leave?" Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, or memory. "Owner died. His son sold the place. New owner brought his own people." Eleanor knew that story. It was happening all over the West. Old ranchers, dying families, selling out corporations, buying up land. References. Lucas reached into his vest pocket and produced a folded paper. He leaned forward to place it on the desk, and Eleanor caught a scent of sage and leather and something cleaner soap, she realized. He'd cleaned up for this interview. She unfolded the letter. It was from William Richardson, owner of the Double R, written 3 months before his death. The old man's shaky handwriting praised Lucas Rourke as the finest horseman and most honest man I've employed in 40 years of ranching. Any owner would be blessed to have him. Mr. Richardson was generous, Lucas said quietly. Was he accurate? Those green eyes met hers again. I work hard, ma'am. I know cattle, horses, and land. I don't drink to excess, I don't gamble, and I've never stolen so much as a horseshoe nail. I can break a Mustang or birth a breech calf. I can read and write and do figures well enough. And I keep my word. It was the simplest, most honest self-assessment Eleanor had heard all week. No boasting, no false promises, just facts delivered in that low, steady voice. The position pays $40 a month, Eleanor heard herself say. Plus room and board in the foreman's cabin. But I should be honest with you, Mr. Rourke. This ranch is in trouble. She waited for him to stand up and leave like 3 of the others had when she'd mentioned the ranch's financial problems. Instead, Lucas simply nodded. I heard your father passed. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Eleanor's throat tightened. The truth is, we're 6 months behind on mortgage payments to the bank in Denver. We lost half our herd last winter to weather and wolves. Our equipment is old, our fences are failing, and most of our hands quit because I couldn't pay them regularly. How many hands do you have now? 3. Old Pete Morrison, who's been here since my father's time. His grandson Danny, who's only 16 but works like a man. And Frank Yu, Mrs. Chen's nephew. That's not enough for 12,000 acres. I know. Eleanor met his gaze. But it's all I can afford. The bank has given me until September to catch up the payments, or they'll foreclose. Mr. Arthur Calloway has made it very clear he'll buy the property at auction. Lucas's jaw tightened at Calloway's name. I know that name. He's got a reputation. Nothing illegal, Eleanor said bitterly. Just ruthless. He's been trying to buy Wade Ranch since before my father died. Now he's just waiting for me to fail. And if you don't fail? The question was so unexpected that Eleanor laughed a short, harsh sound. Then we keep the ranch? We build it back. We prove that a woman can run 12,000 acres as well as any man. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, those green eyes studying her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. Finally he said, What do you need from a foreman? Everything, Eleanor admitted. Someone who knows ranching better than I do. Someone who can manage the hands, repair the equipment, secure the herds. Someone who can figure out why we're hemorrhaging money when the land is good and the water is clean. Someone I can trust. That last one's the hardest to find, Lucas said. I know. Eleanor straightened in her chair. Mr. Rourke, I'm going to be frank. You're the first applicant all week who hasn't either insulted me for being a woman, demanded wages I can't pay, or felt wrong in a way I can't quite name. But I'm at my wit's end. If you walk out that door, I don't know what I'll do. So I'm asking you, can you help me save my father's ranch, or should I just surrender now and marry Arthur Calloway like everyone expects? The words had come out more raw than she'd intended, carrying all the exhaustion and fear and fury of the past 6 months. She waited for Lucas to look away, to make some excuse to do what every other man had done, treat her like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be helped. Instead, Lucas Rourke leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and said in that steady voice, Miss Wade, I don't know you, and you don't know me. But I know ranching, and I know hard work, and I know what it's like to lose something that matters. If you're willing to take a chance on a drifter cowboy with nothing but his word and his skills, then I'm willing to stay and help you fight. Not for $40 a month, though I appreciate the offer, but because some things are worth fighting for, and a woman's right to keep her father's legacy is one of them. Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen solid since the day she'd found her father on the porch, his hand still reaching for the door. She blinked hard against the sudden sting in her eyes. When can you start? She whispered. Right now, if you'll have me. Eleanor stood and Lucas rose with her. She extended her hand across the desk and he took it. His hand was calloused and warm and strong, and the handshake lasted only a moment, but Eleanor felt the weight of it, a promise made, a partnership formed, a decision that would change everything. "Welcome to Wade Ranch, Mr. Rourke. Try not to let me down." "I'll do my best, ma'am." "And Mr. Rourke," Eleanor released his hand but held his gaze. "Call me Eleanor. If we're going to save this ranch together, we might as well use first names." The corner of his mouth lifted in the ghost of a smile. "Lucas. Lucas," she repeated, and the name felt right in her mouth like a word she'd been waiting to say. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Should I prepare the foreman's cabin, Miss Wade?" "Yes, please. And ask Pete to show Lucas around the property. I want him to see everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly." Lucas settled his hat back on his head. "I'll start with the horses, if that's all right. Horse is usually the measure of a ranch." "The stables are behind the main barn," Eleanor said. "Fair warning, they're not in great shape." "I'll manage." Lucas tipped his hat to her, then to Mrs. Chen, and headed for the door. But at the threshold, he paused and looked back. "Eleanor." "Yes." "Thank you for the chance." Then he was gone. His quiet footsteps receding down the hallway, and Eleanor sank back into her father's chair with her heart pounding. Mrs. Chen stepped into the study, her dark eyes knowing. "That one's different." "Is he?" Eleanor tried to sound casual. "You hired him in 5 minutes. The others you could barely stand for 20. Eleanor didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she turned to the window that overlooked the ranch yard. She could see Lucas crossing toward the stables, his long stride purposeful. Old Pete Morrison intercepted him, and even from this distance, Eleanor could see the relief on the old cowboy's face as they shook hands. "I hope I made the right choice," Eleanor murmured. "So do I," Mrs. Chen said. "Because if that young man is working for Arthur Calloway, we're all in more trouble than we thought." Eleanor's blood ran cold. I think Calloway has been very interested in this ranch, and very patient and very thorough. I think it would be like him to plant someone here, but—" Mrs. Chen tilted her head. "I've been reading people for 50 years, Miss Eleanor. That young man, he's either the most honest soul I've ever met or the best liar in Colorado. And my gut says he's the first." "Mine too," Eleanor admitted. "God help us if we're both wrong." By sunset, Eleanor had her answer. She'd spent the afternoon in the house going over the ranch books again. Columns of numbers that never added up right. Expenses that kept climbing, income that kept shrinking. She was so absorbed in the ledgers that she didn't notice the time until Mrs. Chen brought her a cup of coffee and pointed at the window. "You should see what your new foreman's been doing." Eleanor looked up. Through the western window, she could see the ranch yard bathed in the orange light of late afternoon. And what she saw made her stand up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. The front corral, which that morning had been listing dangerously, its fence posts rotted and rails loose, now stood straight and solid. Lucas was hammering in the last rail, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his movements efficient. Old Pete and young Danny Morrison were working with him, and even Frank Yu had joined in. But it was more than the physical work that caught Eleanor's attention. It was the way Lucas moved among the men, not ordering them around like some foreman did, but working alongside them, his voice low and calm whenever he spoke. She watched him hand Pete a tool, clap Danny on the shoulder when the boy finished a section laugh at something Frank said. In 6 hours, he'd done what weeks of her frustrated attempts had failed to accomplish. He'd united her skeleton crew into something resembling a team. Eleanor grabbed her jacket and headed outside. The evening air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of sawdust and fresh-cut pine. As she approached the corral, she heard Lucas saying, "Not about doing it fast, it's about doing it right. A fence built in haste won't hold the first time a spooked horse hits it, but a fence built with care, that'll stand through winters and storms and whatever else God throws at it." "Amen to that," Pete said, his weathered face creased in a grin. The old cowboy had to be pushing 70, but he'd worked Wade Ranch for 40 years. "Boy's got the right of it, Miss Eleanor. This fence'll hold just fine now." Lucas turned at Pete's words, and Eleanor saw that his face was streaked with dust and sweat despite the cool evening. "Eleanor, I hope you don't mind we use some of the lumber from the old hay shed that collapsed last month. Seemed a waste to let it rot." "I don't mind at all," Eleanor said, genuinely impressed. This is remarkable. You've done more this afternoon than we've accomplished in weeks. Had good help. Lucas gestured to the other men. Pete here knows this ranch inside and out. Danny's got the strongest back I've seen on a 16-year-old. And Frank's got a knack for finding exactly the right tool at the right time. Eleanor noticed how the three ranch hands straightened at Lucas's praise, especially young Danny, whose chest puffed out with pride. It was a small thing, recognition, but it was something Eleanor had been too overwhelmed to give properly. Lucas had been here 6 hours, and he already understood something she'd been too stressed to see people worked harder when they felt valued. I walked the property with Pete this afternoon. Lucas continued, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. With your permission, I'd like to go over what I found, but maybe after supper. It's been a long day for everyone. Supper's ready whenever you are, Mrs. Chen called from the porch. And I made extra, so don't be shy about seconds, Mr. Rourke. Call me Lucas, ma'am, and thank you. They gathered in the ranch house kitchen, a large warm room with a stone fireplace, and a table that could seat a dozen, but now held only 6. Mrs. Chen had made beef stew with vegetables from her garden and thick slices of bread that steamed when you broke them open. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her father's place with Lucas to her right. It felt strange having someone in that chair again, but also strangely right. The men dug into their food with the appetite of those who'd done honest work, and for a few minutes the only sounds were spoons scraping bowls and the crackle of the fire. Finally, Pete pushed back his empty bowl and said, Lucas, you said you worked the double R in Wyoming. Yes, sir, 5 years. Bill Richardson was a good man. I met him once at a stock show in Cheyenne. He knew horses like most men know their own names. He did, Lucas agreed. He taught me most of what I know about breaking Mustangs without breaking their spirit. We've got some Mustangs that need breaking, Danny said eagerly. The boy was all gangly limbs and enthusiasm. Been running wild in the North Canyon since last summer. Nobody's had time to work with them. I'll take a look tomorrow, Lucas said. Might be we can turn them into working horses, save money on buying trained stock. Eleanor listened to this exchange with growing relief. Lucas wasn't just competent, he was already thinking ahead, planning scene possibilities. It was exactly what she needed. After supper, the hands retired to the bunkhouse, and Mrs. Chen began clearing dishes. Lucas stood to help, which earned him an approving look from the housekeeper, but Eleanor said, Lucas, could we talk in the study about what you found today? Of course. They walked through the quiet house to the study. Eleanor lit the lamps and the warm light pushed back the evening shadows. She settled into her chair and Lucas took the same seat he'd occupied that morning, but now there was an ease between them that hadn't existed before. Lucas pulled out his notebook and flipped it open. All right, I'm going to be direct because sugarcoating won't help anyone. I appreciate directness. Your ranch has good bones, Lucas began. The land is excellent watergrass, timber, everything a cattle operation needs. Your foundation breeding stock, what's left of it, shows quality bloodlines. The location is prime. So the question is, why is Wade Ranch failing when it should be thriving? Eleanor leaned forward. That's what I've been trying to figure out for 6 months. I think I know. Lucas's green eyes were serious. First, your equipment is old and breaking down, which slows everything. Second, you don't have enough hands to properly manage this acreage. Third, and most important, someone's been sabotaging you. Eleanor's blood went cold. What? Small things, easy to miss if you're not looking for them. But I found 3 sections of fence that had been deliberately cut, not broken. Wire snips, probably. Found tracks where cattle had been driven off your land onto open range where anyone could claim them. And Pete showed me where your hay barn accidentally caught fire last month. Eleanor, that was no accident. Someone poured coal oil along the base of the north wall. The room seemed to spin. Are you sure? I'm sure. Pete smelled it too, but he didn't want to worry you without proof. Calloway, Eleanor whispered. It has to be Calloway. That would be my guess, but we can't prove it. Not yet. The men doing the work probably don't even know who hired them. But here's what I think is happening. Someone's been systematically weakening your operation, making it look like bad luck and bad management, pushing you toward bankruptcy so the ranch will go to auction and Calloway can buy it for pennies on the dollar. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. That bastard! He's smart about it, Lucas said. Nothing obvious, nothing you could take to the law, just a steady erosion of everything that makes this place work. So what do we do? Lucas closed his notebook. We fight back, but carefully. First, we secure what we have, repair fences, post guards on the herds, protect the buildings. Second, we bring in more hands. I know good men who need work. Some might work for reduced wages if they believe in the cause. Third, we document everything. Every cut fence, every missing cow, every suspicious incident. Build a case. And fourth, he paused. Fourth, we make Wade Ranch profitable again. Show the bank you can make those payments. Remove Callaway's advantage. That's a lot to do by September. It is, but I don't think we have a choice. Lucas met her eyes. Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Do you want to save this ranch, or do you want to escape it? The question hit Eleanor like cold water. She opened her mouth to snap that of course she wanted to save it, but Lucas held up a hand. Wait, really think about it. Because if part of you wants out, wants to sell and move to Denver or San Francisco or somewhere, you can have an easier life that's understandable. This is brutally hard work, especially for someone who wasn't raised to do it. There's no shame in admitting it. Eleanor stood and walked to the window. Outside the ranch lay in darkness just the warm glow of the bunkhouse windows and the starlight overhead. This land, these mountains, this life. Her father had loved it with everything in him, had died for it, really working himself into an early grave trying to keep it afloat. Did she love it? Or did she just feel obligated to it? She thought about her father's hands, rough and scarred from decades of work. She thought about the way the morning sun turned the eastern pastures to gold. She thought about the creek running clear and cold through the valley, and the way the cattle looked scattered across the hillsides like dark spots on green velvet. She thought about the house where she'd been born, where her mother had lived and died, where every room held memories of laughter and loss and long Colorado winters. And she thought about this morning, standing on the porch with creditors at her door and desperation in her heart, and how close she'd come to simply giving up. Then she thought about Lucas Rourke arriving like an answer to a prayer she hadn't quite prayed. She thought about the fence standing straight again. She thought about the men working together with hope in their eyes. She thought about the possibility, the impossible, fragile possibility, that maybe, just maybe, they could actually do this. Eleanor turned to face Lucas. I want to save it. Not because it's my father's legacy, though it is. Not because I'm too stubborn to let Arthur Callaway win, though I am. But because this morning I was drowning. And tonight, for the first time in 6 months, I feel like maybe I can breathe again. That's because of you, Lucas. Because you showed up and you saw what I couldn't see, and you're willing to fight. So yes, I want to save Wade Ranch, and I'm asking you to help me do it. Lucas stood too, and in the lamplight, his eyes were the color of new leaves. Then we'll save it, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, Eleanor repeated. They stood there for a moment, and Eleanor felt something shift between them, a connection forming fragile as spun glass but real. This man was a stranger. She'd met him 12 hours ago. She didn't know his story, didn't know where he'd come from, or what ghosts he carried. But she trusted him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone since her father died. Get some sleep, Lucas said finally. Tomorrow, we start for real. What's on the agenda? Everything. We've got a ranch to save. Ta. The next morning, Eleanor woke before dawn to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and headed outside to find Lucas already at work on the main barn, repairing a section of roof that had been leaking. The sky was still dark stars fading in the east, where the sun would soon rise. You're up early, Eleanor called. Lucas looked down from the roof. Ranching doesn't wait for sunrise. Want to hand me that bucket of nails? Eleanor climbed the ladder and passed up the bucket and somehow found herself on the roof too, holding boards steady while Lucas hammered them into place. They worked in comfortable silence, the rhythm of the work soothing. When the sun finally broke over the mountains, painting the world in shades of rose and gold, they both paused to watch. Beautiful, Lucas said softly. It is. Eleanor looked at him instead of the sunrise. His profile was strong in the new light, his jaw shadowed with morning stubble, his eyes focused on the distant peaks. Lucas, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really come to Wade Ranch? A man with your experience could find work anywhere. Why here? Lucas was quiet for so long, Eleanor thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Because I'm tired of running. I've been drifting for 12 years working other people's ranches, building other people's dreams. And I guess I'm hoping that maybe if I help you save this place, I'll finally feel like I've got somewhere to stand, somewhere that matters." Does that make sense? More than you know, Eleanor whispered. They finished the roof as the ranch came alive below them, Pete heading to the corral, Danny fetching water, Mrs. Chen lighting the kitchen stove. From their high vantage point, Eleanor could see her ranch spreading out in all directions, 12,000 acres of possibility. And for the first time in months, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Lucas worked from before dawn until after dark, and wherever he worked, things improved. He fixed fences with Pete's help. He worked the wild mustangs with patience and skill until they accepted saddle and rider. He brought in 2 more hands, men he'd worked with before, who agreed to wages Eleanor could barely afford, because Lucas vouched for her. And slowly, carefully, Wade Ranch began to transform. But the sabotage continued. One morning, they found a water pump smashed. Another day, 20 head of cattle vanished from the north pasture. Then someone poisoned the feed in the south barn, sickening 4 horses before Lucas figured it out and stopped the rest of the animals from eating it. Each incident made Eleanor angrier, but Lucas stayed calm, methodical. He documented everything in his notebook. He posted guards. He varied patrol routes so no pattern could be predicted. And he started asking questions in town. Careful questions, friendly questions. The kind that seemed like simple curiosity but gathered information. "Calloway's getting nervous," Lucas told Eleanor one evening in late May. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "People are talking about how Wade Ranch is coming back, how you've got a good foreman, how maybe you'll make it after all." "Is that bad?" Eleanor asked. "It's dangerous. Desperate men do stupid things. We need to be ready." Eleanor nodded. Over the past 2 months, she'd learned to trust Lucas's instincts completely. He was right more often than not, and even when he was wrong, his mistakes were honest ones made in service of doing what was best for the ranch. But it was more than professional trust, now Eleanor admitted to herself in quiet moments. She'd started looking forward to these evening conversations on the porch, started noticing the way Lucas's eyes crinkled when he smiled, started feeling her heart beat faster when he walked into a room. She was falling for her foreman, and she had no idea what to do about it. "Eleanor," Lucas's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You all right?" "Fine, just tired." "You're working too hard." "Says the man who works 18-hour days." "That's different." "How?" Lucas turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his expression was soft. "Because it's my job to work myself to the bone. It's your job to run this place, which means staying healthy and rested and able to make good decisions. You're no use to Wade Ranch if you collapse from exhaustion." "I could say the same to you." "You could, but I'm used to it." "You're not." He paused. "When's the last time you did something just for yourself? Something that wasn't about the ranch or the debts or the fight?" Eleanor couldn't remember. "I don't have time for that." "Maybe you should make time. Even soldiers get leave from the battlefield." "Is that what this is, a battlefield?" "Sometimes." Lucas leaned back in his chair. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Her stomach clenched. "What?" "I rode into town this afternoon. Stopped at the saloon, had a beer, listened to talk. Arthur Calloway was there. He made a point of coming over to talk to me." Eleanor's blood went cold. "What did he say?" "He offered me a job, double what you're paying plus a bonus if I could convince you to sell Wade Ranch to him." The world seemed to stop. Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She just stared at Lucas, waiting for him to continue, terrified of what would come next. Lucas met her eyes. "I told him no. Told him I already have a job and I keep my word. He didn't like that. Said I was making a mistake. Said Wade Ranch would be his by September no matter what I did, so I might as well profit from the inevitable. And then," Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper, "and then I finished my beer and left. But Eleanor, you need to understand something. Calloway knows about me now. Knows I'm not going to help him, which means I've become a problem he needs to solve. Lucas, I'm not afraid of him, but you need to be careful. If he can't get to the ranch through me, he'll try another way, maybe through you directly. Eleanor thought about Arthur Calloway, 45 years old, handsome in a cold way, wealthy and powerful, and utterly ruthless. He'd been courting her since her father's death, showing up with flowers and offers of help that always had strings attached. She'd rebuffed him every time, but he'd been patient, confident that eventually she'd have no choice. He's going to propose again, Eleanor said. I can feel it. Probably. And when he does, you need to be ready with an answer that doesn't give him any opening. The answer is no. It's always been no. Lucas looked at her steadily. Even if saying no means losing the ranch, the question hung between them like a physical weight. Eleanor thought about the mortgage coming due in September, about the money they still needed, about the sabotage that continued despite their best efforts, about the very real possibility that come autumn she'd lose everything anyway. And then she thought about becoming Arthur Calloway's wife, sleeping in his bed, bearing his children, watching him tear down everything her father built and remake it in his own image. Even then, Eleanor said firmly, I'd rather lose fighting than win by surrendering to a man like him. Something flickered across Lucas's face, respect maybe, or relief. Good. Because I've got an idea for how we might actually pull this off, but it's risky and it's going to require perfect timing. Tell me. Lucas stood and held out his hand. Walk with me. I'll explain. Eleanor took his hand and rose. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and for a moment neither of them moved. They stood there on the porch in the twilight, hands clasped the ranch quiet around them. Lucas, Eleanor said softly, thank you for everything, for showing up that day, for staying, for believing this could work. I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have figured it out, Lucas said. You're stronger than you know. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and fighting anyway. And Eleanor, he squeezed her hand gently. You're the bravest person I know. The words hit Eleanor somewhere deep in a place that had been empty for so long she'd forgotten it existed. She looked up at Lucas, at his honest green eyes and his serious face, and she wanted nothing more than to close the distance between them, to feel his arms around her, to stop pretending that what was growing between them was simple professional respect. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not when so much was at stake and the ranch's survival hung by a thread. If she complicated things now, if she let her feelings get tangled up in business, it could destroy everything. So instead she released his hand and said, "Show me this risky idea of yours." Lucas nodded, and if he felt the same magnetic pull Eleanor did, he didn't show it. He led her down from the porch and across the yard toward the creek. As they walked through the gathering darkness, he began to explain his plan, a plan that would either save Wade Ranch or destroy their last chance at survival. And Eleanor listened, her heart pounding, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. The ranch was worth fighting for. But the man walking beside her, he might be worth even more. The creek murmured in the darkness as Lucas and Eleanor walked along its bank, their boots crunching on the smooth river stones. The water caught starlight and threw it back in silver ripples, and somewhere in the distance a night bird called out its lonesome song. The way I see it, Lucas began, his voice low and thoughtful, Calloway expects you to fail slowly. He's counting on the sabotage wearing you down until September comes and you can't make the mortgage payment. But what if we flip that script? What if we don't just survive? What if we thrive? Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter against the evening chill. I'm listening. We have something Calloway doesn't know about. We have quality breeding stock that bull your father bought from Montana 3 years ago, the one Pete says cost a small fortune. He's exceptional. And we have 32 heifers of prime age. What if we host a cattle auction here in July, invite buyers from Denver, Cheyenne, even as far as Kansas City? Sell off some of the offspring. Keep the best for our own herd. If we do it right, we could raise enough money to make 2 or 3 mortgage payments in one shot. Eleanor stopped walking. That's ambitious and expensive. We'd need to advertise, arrange for buyers to travel here, provide accommodations. I know, it's a gamble, but here's the thing. Word is already spreading that Wade Ranch is coming back. People are curious, and nothing draws cattlemen like the chance to see quality stock. Your father had a reputation for breeding excellence. We leverage that. Callaway will try to stop us. Almost certainly, which is why we don't announce it until the last minute. We spread quiet word through the right channels, then make it official only a week before. Not enough time for him to organize serious interference. Eleanor turned to face Lucas, studying his face in the starlight. You've really thought this through. I've been thinking about little else for 3 weeks. Lucas met her gaze. Eleanor, I'm not going to lie to you. This could backfire spectacularly. If the auction fails, if buyers don't show, if something goes wrong, we'll have spent money we don't have and be in an even worse position. But doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way we're fighting. The creek whispered behind them, and Eleanor felt the weight of decision pressing down on her shoulders. Everything Lucas said made sense. It was bold, risky, exactly the kind of aggressive move her father might have made in his prime. But it terrified her. When would we need to decide? She asked. Soon. If we're doing a July auction, we need to start preparations now. Get the stock in prime condition, repair the auction facilities, spread the word. Every day we wait makes it harder. Eleanor closed her eyes. She could hear her father's voice in her memory, rough and warm. Fortune favors the bold Ellie girl. You can't win if you don't bet. He'd said that the day he'd bought that expensive Montana bull over her mother's protests, and he'd been right that bull had improved their herd quality tenfold. All right, Eleanor said, opening her eyes. We do it. The auction. Whatever it takes. Lucas smiled, and even in the darkness, she could see the relief and excitement in his expression. We'll make it work. I promise you that. They stood there by the creek, the night settling around them like a blanket. And Eleanor felt a shift between them, something deepening, becoming more than just employer and foreman, more than just two people fighting for the same goal. She felt it in the way Lucas looked at her, in the way her heart beat faster when he was near, in the way she'd started measuring her days by the moments they spent together. But she pushed those feelings down, locked them away. There would be time for that later. Maybe. If they survived. We should get back, she said. Early start tomorrow. Eleanor, Lucas's voice stopped her as she turned. For what it's worth, I believe in you. In this. In what we're building here. I haven't believed in something this much in a long time. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that went beyond cattle and auctions and mortgage payments. Eleanor wanted to tell him that she believed in him too, that he'd become the cornerstone of not just her ranch, but her life. That the thought of him leaving made her chest ache in ways she didn't want to examine. Instead, she said, Thank you, Lucas. That means more than you know. They walked back to the ranch house in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who understand each other without needing words. When they reached the porch, Lucas tipped his hat to her and headed toward the foreman's cabin, and Eleanor watched him go with her heart in her throat. Mrs. Chen was waiting inside her knowing eyes, missing nothing. You're falling for him. Eleanor didn't bother denying it. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's known you since you were a baby. Does he feel the same? I don't know, maybe, but it doesn't matter. We have too much at stake to complicate things with feelings. Mrs. Chen made a soft sound that might have been agreement or sympathy. Your mother said the same thing about your father. Said she couldn't court the ranch hand her father had hired, that it wasn't proper, that it would complicate things. But love doesn't wait for convenience, Miss Eleanor. It comes when it comes, and fighting it only makes it hurt more. My mother married my father. Eventually. After nearly losing him to a stampede that made her realize life was too short to worry about what was proper. But that's a story for another night. Go to bed, child. Tomorrow will come early enough. Eleanor climbed the stairs to her room, but sleep eluded her. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the ranch cattle, lowing in the distance, the wind in the pines, the creak of old timber settling. And she thought about Lucas Rourke, the stranger who'd become essential to her life in the span of 2 months, and wondered what would happen when this was all over. Would he stay? Or would he drift on to the next ranch? The next job, leaving her with nothing but memories and a saved ranch that would feel empty without him in it. She fell asleep still wondering and dreamed of green eyes and steady hands and a voice that promised everything would be all right. The next morning brought the start of a new intensity to ranch operations. Lucas gathered everyone, Pete, Danny, Frank, and the two new hands Jim Holloway and Samuel Cross in the main yard as the sun rose over the eastern peaks. "All right," Lucas said, his voice carrying easily in the clear morning air. "Miss Wade and I have decided to host a cattle auction in mid-July. That gives us 6 weeks to get ready. This is going to be the most important 6 weeks of this ranch's existence, and I need every one of you at your best." "What do you need us to do?" Pete asked, his old eyes sharp with interest. "Everything. We need the stock in prime condition. That means better feed, careful management, health checks. We need the auction facilities repaired and cleaned. We need to spread word to the right buyers without tipping off Arthur Calloway. And we need to stay vigilant because the closer we get to success, the more desperate our enemies will become." "You think Calloway will try something big?" Jim Holloway asked. He was a lean man in his 30s with a scar across his cheek and the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen trouble before. "I think he'll try whatever he can get away with," Lucas said grimly. "Which is why we're doubling the night watch. 2 men every night rotating positions, and I want everyone armed. Not looking for trouble, but ready for it if it comes." Danny, young and eager, spoke up. "I can take watch duty. I'm good at staying awake." "I know you are, Danny, but you're also 16, and if shooting starts, I want you somewhere safe. You'll help during the day, but nights you stay in the bunkhouse unless I specifically say otherwise. Understood?" The boy looked disappointed, but nodded. "Yes, sir." Eleanor, watching from the porch, felt a warmth spread through her chest at the way Lucas managed the men, firm but fair, clear in his expectations, but also clearly concerned for their safety. He'd taken what had been a demoralized, scattered group and forged them into something resembling a real crew, and they respected him for it. Over the following weeks, Wade Ranch transformed. Lucas worked them all hard, but he worked himself harder. Eleanor would wake before dawn to find him already in the stables checking horses. She'd go to bed long after dark and see lamplight still burning in the foreman's cabin as he went over plans and schedules and 100 small details that would make or break the auction. The breeding stock responded to the improved care. The Montana bull, a massive beast named Thunder, gleamed with health. The heifers filled out their coats, shining. Even the Mustangs Lucas had been training looked like prime working horses, now ready to be sold to buyers who appreciated quality. But the sabotage escalated. It started small. Tools went missing. Gates were left open. Feed sacks were slashed, spilling grain that had to be painstakingly recovered. Lucas documented each incident in his notebook with grim determination, but they all knew these were just annoyances, preparations for something bigger. The something bigger came on a hot night in mid-June. Eleanor was in the ranch house going over the advertisement copy for the auction. Lucas had surprised her by revealing he could write quite well, and together they'd crafted descriptions of the stock that were both honest and enticing when she heard shouting from outside. She ran to the window and her blood froze. The main barn was on fire. She grabbed her father's rifle and bolted out the door. The night was alive with orange light and black smoke, and she could hear horses screaming in terror from the stables adjacent to the barn. Men were running everywhere, Pete and Danny hauling buckets from the well, Jim and Samuel trying to beat back flames with wet blankets. And Lucas was running into the burning barn. "Lucas, no!" Eleanor screamed, but he was already through the door, disappearing into the smoke and flames. Mrs. Chen grabbed Eleanor's arm. "The horses! We need to get them out before the fire spreads to the stables." Eleanor forced herself to think. The stables, right. She ran toward them, her lungs already burning from smoke. Inside, the horses were panicking, rearing and kicking in their stalls. She started opening gates, slapping haunches to drive them out into the night. They bolted past her in a thunder of hooves, whites of their eyes showing, but at least they were out. At least they were safe. She'd cleared 4 stalls when she realized there was one more, the birthing stall where the chestnut mare was due to foal any day now. Eleanor ran to it and found the mare downsides, heaving eyes rolling in terror. She was in labor, and she couldn't move. "Come on, girl," Eleanor begged, tugging on the halter. "Please, you have to get up. Please." But the mare was too far gone in labor, too panicked, too weak. She wouldn't rise. Eleanor heard a crash from the barn and looked up to see part of the roof collapse. Where was Lucas? Why hadn't he come out? God, what if he was trapped in there? What if he was hurt? What if... Then she saw him emerging from the smoke like a ghost, his clothes smoldering his face black with soot. And in his arms, impossibly, he carried two terrified calves that must have been penned in the barn's far corner. He stumbled toward the water trough and released the calves, who bolted into the darkness. Then he saw Eleanor in the stable and his eyes went wide. "The stables are going to catch," he shouted. "Get out! The mare! She's down! She's foaling! I can't move her!" Lucas ran to her, and together they tried to lift the mare, but she was 1,000 pounds of panicked horseflesh, and she wasn't cooperating. The heat from the barn was intense now, and Eleanor could see sparks landing on the stable roof. They had minutes at most before this building became an inferno too. "All right," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "New plan. We stay with her." "Lucas, that's insane. I'm not leaving her to burn, and I'm not leaving you. So we stay and we help her deliver fast, and then we all get out together. Can you assist with a birth?" Eleanor had helped with difficult calvings before. "Yes." "Then let's do this." It was the most surreal experience of Eleanor's life, kneeling in the straw of a stable that was about to catch fire, her hands inside a laboring mare, while Lucas held the animal's head and murmured soothing words, and outside the world burned. She could feel the foal's position, could tell it was breech, could know with absolute certainty that if they didn't turn it right now, both mare and foal would die. "I have to turn it," she said. "Do it." Eleanor closed her eyes and said a prayer, and reached deeper, found the foal's hind legs, began the delicate process of repositioning. The mare screamed and thrashed, and Lucas held her down with strength. Eleanor wouldn't have believed possible, and somewhere in the background she heard men shouting that the stable roof was catching. Then the foal turned, and suddenly everything happened at once. The mare gave a great heave, and the foal slid out in a gush of fluid, all spindly legs and wet coat, and Eleanor cut the cord with her pocket knife and cleared the foal's nostrils, and the tiny creature took its first gasping breath. "We have to go now," Lucas said. He hauled Eleanor to her feet with one hand and somehow got the other hand under the foal. The mare, exhausted but freed from the burden of birth, struggled to her feet with surprising speed. Lucas carried the foal, Eleanor guided the mare, and they stumbled out of the stable just as the roof caught fully flames roaring into the night sky. They made it 20 feet before Eleanor's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the ground, her arms shaking, her face streaked with soot and tears and mare fluids she didn't want to think about. Lucas set the foal down gently, and immediately the mother began licking her baby clean, her panic already forgotten in the ancient instinct of motherhood. Jim and Samuel appeared with more water buckets. Pete was organizing a bucket brigade. And slowly, painfully, they brought the fire under control. The barn was a total loss, nothing left but blackened timber and smoking ruins. But the stables were saved, the house was untouched, and miraculously, impossibly, no one was dead. Eleanor sat on the ground watching the mare nuzzle her newborn foal, and she started laughing. It was an edge of hysteria laugh, but it was genuine. They'd done it. They'd saved them. They'd run into a burning building and come out with life. Lucas dropped down beside her, his breathing ragged and his clothes still smoking in places. "You're crazy," he said. "You know that, absolutely crazy. You should have left the stable. You ran into the barn. That's different." "How?" "Because I'm..." He stopped and something shifted in his expression. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you." The words hung in the smoking air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Eleanor turned to look at him. This man who'd risked his life without hesitation, who'd stayed by her side in the fire, who'd carried a newborn foal out of a burning building because it was the right thing to do. His face was blackened with soot. His green eyes were bloodshot from smoke, and he was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Lucas," she started, but he shook his head. Don't say anything. I shouldn't have said that. I work for you, and this is complicated, and we have too much at stake to..." He stood up abruptly. "I need to check the perimeter, make sure this was the only fire." He walked away before Eleanor could respond, disappearing into the chaos of men fighting the last of the flames, and she sat there with her heart hammering and the words he'd almost said echoing in her mind. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you." Mrs. Chen appeared with blankets and hot coffee. "Come inside, Miss Eleanor. You're in shock." "Did you see what he did?" "Everyone saw. That young man has more courage than sense. But then so do you, running into a burning stable. Your father would be proud. Or furious. Probably both." Eleanor let Mrs. Chen help her to her feet. Her legs felt like water, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her hollow and cold despite the heat from the dying fires. She looked around at the destruction, the barn they'd need to rebuild the supplies they'd lost, the setback this represented. And then she saw Lucas in the distance, talking intensely with Jim and Samuel, his notebook already out documenting the incident, staying focused even after nearly dying. "I'm falling in love with him," Eleanor whispered. Mrs. Chen smiled. "I know, child. The whole ranch knows. The only question is what you're going to do about it." "Nothing. Not yet. Not while we're fighting for survival. Love doesn't wait for convenient timing." "Then love will have to learn patience." Eleanor took the coffee cup and wrapped her hands around its warmth. "Because if I distract him now, if I complicate things with feelings when he needs to focus on keeping us alive, I could cost us everything. The ranch, our futures, maybe even our lives if Calloway decides to escalate further. And if something happens to him before you tell him." Eleanor's chest constricted at the thought. "Don't." "I'm just saying life is uncertain, Miss Eleanor. Fire and sabotage and desperate men do desperate things. If you care for him, maybe he deserves to know. After the auction, after we secure the ranch, after we're safe, then I'll tell him." Eleanor looked at Mrs. Chen. "If he'll still listen." The morning revealed the full extent of the damage. The barn was a total loss, black timbers and ash, nothing salvageable. They'd lost hay tools, leather goods, and several $1,000s worth of equipment. But they'd saved the animals, and they'd saved the breeding stock, and somehow that felt like victory. Lucas called a meeting after breakfast. All the hands gathered in the ranch house kitchen, and Eleanor could see the anger and determination on every face. "Last night was arson," Lucas said flatly. "I found coal oil cans hidden in the brush near the barn. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder of us, of the stock of this ranch's chances." "Calloway," Pete spat. "Almost certainly. But we can't prove it. Not yet. So here's what we do. We keep going. We don't let him know he's rattled us. We repair what we can, we work around what we can't, and we move forward with the auction as planned. Because if we stop now, he wins. And I don't know about you all, but I'm not inclined to let a coward who fights with fire get what he wants." "Damn right," Samuel said. The other men muttered agreement. Lucas continued. "But we're changing security protocols. From now on, 3 men on watch at night, not 2. Armed patrols every hour. And we're bringing in reinforcements. I sent word this morning to some men I trust they'll be here by week's end. Good men who know how to handle themselves in trouble." "That'll cost money," Eleanor said quietly. "I know, but it's necessary. These aren't hired guns, they're ranch hands who can fight if they need to, and they're willing to work for reduced wages if I vouch for you." Lucas met her eyes. "Trust me on this." Eleanor nodded. After last night, she'd trust him with anything. The days that followed were intense. Lucas's reinforcements arrived 4 hard-looking men who rode well-trained horses and carried rifles with casual competence. Their leader was a grizzled man named Tom Bridges, who'd apparently saved Lucas's life during a trail drive years ago. He took one look at the burned barn and said, "Someone needs killing." "Legally," Lucas reminded him. "We do this right or we don't do it at all. Your way, boss. But if these bastards come at us again, all bets are off." They rebuilt what they could. The barn would have to wait, too expensive, too time-consuming. But they erected temporary shelters for equipment and stock, reinforced the fences, and turned the ranch into something resembling a fortress without making it look like one. And through it all, Eleanor watched Lucas work. She saw him in the early morning mist training horses with infinite patience. She saw him at midday, shirt plastered to his back with sweat as he hammered posts into hard ground. She saw him at night making rounds with the watch, his rifle easy in his hands. She saw him gentle with frightened animals, firm with wayward hands, strategic with plans and defenses. She saw him risk his life over and over for something that wasn't even his. And she loved him for it, hopeless and helpless and completely. But she kept silent. Because Mrs. Chen was right, love didn't wait for convenient timing, but wisdom meant choosing when to speak, and Eleanor chose to wait. After the auction, after the ranch was safe, after they had time to breathe without threat of immediate destruction. If Lucas felt the same tension, he didn't show it. He was professional, respectful, friendly, in exactly the way a foreman should be with his employer. But sometimes Eleanor caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, and in those moments she thought maybe possibly, hopefully, he felt something too. Then came the day in early July when everything changed again. Eleanor was in the ranch house office reviewing the final auction announcements when she heard horses approaching at speed. She went to the window and saw 3 men she didn't recognize riding up to the house. They weren't dressed like cowboys, they wore town clothes, and their horses were too fine for ranch work. Lucas emerged from the stable and intercepted them. Eleanor couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Lucas's posture change, saw his hand drift toward the gun on his hip. Then one of the men handed him a paper, tipped his hat, and all 3 rode off. Lucas stood staring at the paper for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he folded it carefully and walked toward the house with the deliberate steps of someone carrying bad news. Eleanor met him at the door. What was that legal notice from Arthur Calloway's attorney? Lucas handed her the paper. He's challenging your ownership of the ranch, claims your father had a debt to him that was never repaid, and that the ranch should be forfeit to cover it. Eleanor's hands shook as she read the legal language. This is insane. My father never borrowed money from Calloway. He hated the man. Doesn't matter if it's true. It matters if Calloway can make it look true in court. And according to this, you have to appear before the territorial judge in 2 weeks to dispute the claim, right in the middle of our auction preparations. This is a tactic. He's trying to distract us, rattle us, make us cancel the auction. Or he's trying to tie up the ranch in legal proceedings so that even if you make the mortgage payment, the bank can't accept it because the ownership is disputed. Lucas's jaw was tight. He's smarter than I thought. This could actually work. Eleanor read the notice again, her mind racing. We need a lawyer, a good one. With what money lawyers cost more than we can afford. Then we defend ourselves. Eleanor, this is territorial court. You can't just walk in and argue your case without proper representation. They'll eat you alive. Then what do you suggest? Her voice came out sharper than she intended, edged with frustration and fear. Lucas was quiet for a moment, his green eyes troubled. Then he said, I know someone, a lawyer in Denver who owes me a favor. Let me contact him, see if he'll take the case for reduced fees. It's a long shot, but it's something. Why would a Denver lawyer owe you a favor? That's a long story, but the short version is I once stopped a runaway carriage that was heading straight for his daughter. He said if I ever needed anything at all, I should ask. I never have. Until now. Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes, though whether from exhaustion or emotion she couldn't say. You keep saving things. The ranch, the horses, me. Now possibly our legal standing. Who saves you, Lucas? He looked at her for a long moment, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. Maybe that's not a question I've let myself ask before. Before Eleanor could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. Miss Eleanor, you have another visitor. Arthur Calloway is here. Every muscle in Eleanor's body tensed. Tell him I'm not receiving. I already did. He said he'll wait. He's on the front porch. Lucas's hand went to his gun. Want me to remove him? No, that's what he's hoping for. Some excuse to claim we're violent or unstable. I'll see him, but Lucas, stay close. I'm not going anywhere. They walked to the front porch together, and there he was. Arthur Calloway, dressed in an expensive suit, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun, his smile as cold and sharp as a knife blade. He stood with the casual confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed and expected to own more. Eleanor, he said warmly, as if they were old friends, you look tired. This ranching life doesn't suit you. Mr. Calloway, you're trespassing. State your business and leave. So hostile, I'm hurt. But his eyes were laughing. I came to make you an offer, one last chance before things get truly unpleasant. We received your legal notice. We'll see you in court. Will you? With what lawyer? With what money? Eleanor, be reasonable. You're fighting a losing battle. Your barn is ashes. Your finances are in ruins, and now you have legal troubles that will drain whatever resources you have left. Why suffer through all this when you could simply accept the inevitable? Lucas stepped forward, and Eleanor felt the controlled violence radiating off him. She told you to state your business and leave Calloway. Calloway's eyes flicked to Lucas, and his smile widened. Ah, yes, the faithful Foreman. Tell me, Rourke, are you still so loyal when you know the truth that this ranch will never be yours, no matter how hard you work for it? That you're bleeding your youth and strength for a lost cause? The only thing I know, Lucas said quietly, is that you tried to murder us all by burning that barn. You're a coward who hides behind hired men and legal maneuvers because you don't have the courage to face us directly. Calloway's smile never wavered. Prove it. Prove I had anything to do with that unfortunate accident. We will. I doubt it. But let me make this simple for everyone. Calloway turned back to Eleanor. Marry me. Right now, today, and all of this goes away. The legal challenges, the financial pressure, the sabotage, all of it stops. You keep Wade Ranch, or at least your name stays on it, and in return you get security protection and the resources to make this place truly great. Eleanor felt bile rise in her throat. You think I'd marry you after you tried to kill us? I think you're running out of options, and I think you're smart enough to recognize when you're beaten. Calloway stepped closer, and Lucas moved to block him. Face it, Eleanor. You're a woman alone trying to run a man's operation. It's admirable, really, but it's doomed. Accept my help or accept ruin. Those are your choices. There's a third choice, Eleanor said coldly. I keep fighting. I win the court case. I make my mortgage payments, and I watch you choke on your own arrogance when Wade Ranch thrives despite every underhanded thing you've done to destroy it. Calloway's smile finally faded. You're making a mistake. No, I'm standing my ground. Now get off my property before I have my foreman remove you by force. For a moment, Calloway's mask slipped, and Eleanor saw the rage beneath pure cold fury at being defied. Then he smoothed it away and tipped his hat. Very well. But remember, Eleanor, I offered you a civilized solution. What comes next is on your head. He walked to his horse mounted with practiced ease and rode away without looking back. Eleanor watched him go, her hands clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. That was a threat, Lucas said quietly. I know. He's going to escalate. That barn was a warning. Next time will be worse. I know that too. Eleanor turned to face him. Lucas, if you want to leave, if this is too dangerous, if you... Stop. Lucas's green eyes were fierce. I'm not leaving. I'm not walking away. I'm seeing this through to the end, whatever that end looks like. You understand me? Yes. Good. Because we're going to win this. The court case, the auction, all of it. We're going to save this ranch, and then we're going to watch Arthur Calloway realize he backed the wrong fight. Eleanor believed him. God help her standing there on the porch with the afternoon sun painting everything gold. She believed every word. Because Lucas Rourke didn't make promises he couldn't keep, and he didn't fight battles he didn't intend to win. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For staying, for fighting, for believing in something that isn't even yours. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, and Eleanor saw something shift in his expression, something deep and complex and frighteningly vulnerable. Eleanor, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said weeks ago, but the timing never seemed right, and I kept thinking there would be a better moment, and Lucas, Tom Bridges came running from the north pasture, his face urgent. We've got trouble. The cattle on the north range, someone cut the fence and scattered them. Looks like they drove them toward Calloway's property line. Lucas swore. How many? At least 40 head, maybe more. And the tracks are fresh, happened within the last hour. Lucas turned to Eleanor. I have to go. We need to recover those cattle before Calloway's men can claim they wandered onto his land. I'm coming with you. Eleanor. Don't argue. They're my cattle. I'm coming. Lucas looked like he wanted to protest, but time was wasting. Fine, but you follow my orders out there. No arguments, no hesitation. Agreed. Agreed. They rode out within minutes, Lucas, Eleanor, Tom, Jim, Samuel, and two of the other hands. The North Range was good grazing land, but it bordered Callaway property, which made it vulnerable. They found the cut fence easily enough, the wire snipped clean, not broken. Professional job, Lucas said grimly. They knew exactly what they were doing. The tracks led northwest toward the disputed border between Wade Ranch and Callaway's holdings. They followed at a gallop, and Eleanor felt the old skills coming back. Skills her father had taught her as a girl, riding hard and reading trail sign, and staying focused even when fear tried to cloud her judgment. They found the cattle a mile into what might or might not be Wade land. The property lines in this area had been disputed for years. And they found Callaway's men there too, 5 of them already trying to herd the Wade cattle toward Callaway's ranch proper. Lucas reined in and held up a hand, stopping his crew. "Let me handle this." He rode forward alone, and Eleanor watched with her heart in her throat as he approached Callaway's foreman, a thick-built man with cruel eyes named Jack Dutton. "Those are Wade cattle," Lucas said calmly. "We're taking them back." "These cattle were on open range," Dutton replied. "That makes them fair game. They have Wade brands, and the fence was cut deliberately to drive them here. That's not open range. That's rustling." Dutton smiled. "Prove it." Lucas studied the man for a moment, and Eleanor could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. They were outnumbered 5-7, and Dutton's men were known fighters. A confrontation here could turn deadly very quickly. Then Lucas did something unexpected. He turned in his saddle and called back to his crew. "Tom, ride to town and fetch the marshal. Tell him we have a rustling situation that needs official documentation." Tom nodded and wheeled his horse around, spurring toward town. Dutton's smile faded. "You're making this official. You're attempting to steal marked cattle." "Yes, I'm making it official. Now you can release those cattle and ride away, or you can wait here and explain to the territorial marshal why Callaway's men were trying to herd Wade-branded stock onto Callaway property the same day Wade Ranch received a legal notice challenging ownership. I'm sure that'll look great in court." The silence stretched thin and dangerous. Eleanor could see Dutton weighing his options, could see his men shifting in their saddles, hands drifting toward guns. One wrong move and this could turn into a bloodbath. Then Dutton spat into the dirt. "This ain't over, Rourke." "Never thought it was. Now back away from the cattle." Callaway's men withdrew slowly, their eyes promising violence even as they retreated. Lucas waited until they were out of sight, then signaled his crew forward. "Let's get these cattle home before something else happens." They herded the stock back toward Wade Range, and the whole time Eleanor watched Lucas work. She saw him reading the land, positioning his riders perfectly, moving the cattle with minimal stress. She saw him staying alert for ambush, his rifle across his saddle ready, but not aggressive. She saw him leading without arrogance, commanding without cruelty. And she thought about what he'd been trying to tell her on the porch before Tom interrupted. Something important, something that had made his eyes vulnerable and his voice soft. "Eleanor," Lucas had ridden up beside her. "You all right, T?" "Fine. Just thinking." About what you were going to say on the porch before Tom came running." Lucas was quiet for a moment, guiding his horse around a boulder. Then he said, "Maybe this isn't the right time." "When is the right time, Lucas?" "After another fire. After another legal threat. After someone actually gets killed. After we're safe. We're never going to be completely safe. That's not how life works." Eleanor looked at him. This man who'd become everything to her without her quite realizing it. "Say what you need to say, please." Lucas met her eyes, and Eleanor saw war happening behind that green gaze duty. Battling desire, professional restraint, fighting personal truth. Finally he said, "What I was going to say was that this ranch isn't the only thing I'm fighting for anymore. And that scares me because I've spent 12 years not caring about anything enough to be scared of losing it. But here we are." The words hung between them like a confession and a question and a promise all at once. Eleanor felt her chest tighten, felt tears threaten, felt everything she'd been holding back for months crash against the walls she'd built. "Lucas, don't say anything yet. Just think about it, about what happens after, if there is an after." He looked away. "We should keep moving. Storm's coming." Eleanor glanced at the sky and saw he was right. Clouds were building over the mountains, dark and heavy with rain. They pushed the cattle harder, and by the time they reached Wade Range and repaired the cut fence, the first drops were falling. The storm that hit that night was biblical. Thunder shook the windows, lightning turned the world white and terrible, and rain fell in sheets that turned the ranch yard into a sea of mud. Eleanor lay in her bed listening to the fury, thinking about Lucas in the foreman's cabin, thinking about his words, thinking about the impossible, wonderful, terrifying possibility that he felt what she felt. Somewhere in the chaos of wind and rain, she heard shouting. She ran to the window and saw lights in the distance, torches moving toward the ranch buildings. Someone was coming. And this time Eleanor knew it wouldn't end with just a burned barn. Eleanor didn't stop to think. She grabbed her father's revolver from the desk drawer, checked the cylinder with hands that had learned not to shake during moments of crisis, and ran for the stairs. Mrs. Chen was already up, a rifle in her capable hands, her face set with grim determination. "Wake the men," Eleanor said. "Those torches—" "I see them. Go. I'll sound the alarm." Eleanor burst through the front door into the storm. Rain lashed at her face immediately, soaking through her nightdress and robe, but she barely noticed. The torches were closer now, maybe 20 of them moving in an organized line toward the ranch buildings. Not a mob, an attack force. Lucas appeared out of the darkness, his rifle in hand, his face hard as granite. "Get back inside." "Like hell. How many?" "At least 20, maybe more. They're using the storm as cover." He grabbed her arm. "Eleanor, listen to me. This is what Calloway's been building toward. This is the end game. I need you safe. I'm not hiding while... I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to command from a defensible position. You're the owner. The men need to see you standing firm, not running around in the rain getting shot at." His eyes were fierce in the lightning flash. "Please, trust me on this." Eleanor wanted to argue, but he was right. She nodded. "The house. We'll defend from the house." "Good. Tom, Jim, get Miss Wade inside. Samuel, Frank with me. We're going to try to head them off before they reach the main buildings." The men moved with practiced efficiency, and Eleanor let Tom and Jim escort her back to the porch. But she didn't go inside. She took up position behind the thick timber railing, her revolver ready, and watched as Lucas and the others disappeared into the rain-dark night. The waiting was torture. Minutes stretched into eternities while thunder rolled and lightning illuminated brief, terrible tableaus. She could hear shouting now, male voices calling out orders. Then came the first gunshot, sharp and clear, even through the storm, and suddenly the world exploded into violence. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like deadly fireflies. Eleanor saw Lucas and his men taking cover behind the water trough, returning fire at shapes barely visible in the rain. She saw one of Calloway's men go down, saw another clutch his shoulder and retreat. But there were so many of them, and they kept coming, pressing forward with the confidence of superior numbers. "They're trying to flank us," Tom shouted. "East side." Eleanor swung her revolver toward the barn and saw 3 men creeping through the shadows. She didn't hesitate. She aimed carefully, squeezed the trigger, and sent a bullet into the dirt at their feet. They scattered, seeking cover, and she fired twice more to keep them pinned. "Good shooting, Miss Eleanor," Danny called from a window. The boy had disobeyed orders and armed himself, and right now, Eleanor was grateful for it. The firefight lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Then, as suddenly as it started, Calloway's men began to retreat. They fell back in good order, not routing, but withdrawing strategically, and Eleanor felt cold dread settle in her stomach. This wasn't defeat. This was something else. Lucas ran back to the porch, breathing hard. "Everyone all right?" "We're fine. Did anyone get hurt?" Frank took a graze on his arm, nothing serious. But Eleanor, this was a diversion. They wanted us focused on the main attack while... Mrs. Chen's scream cut through the night. Eleanor's heart stopped. She spun and ran into the house, Lucas right behind her. They found Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, her rifle on the floor, her hands pressed to her mouth. And kneeling beside her, his face bloody, was Pete Morrison. "Pete!" Eleanor dropped to his side. "What happened?" The old cowboy's voice was weak. "They came through the back, 4 of them. I tried to stop them, but..." He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "They took them. They took Danny and Mrs. Chen's nephew, Frank. Knocked me cold when I tried to fight." Miss Eleanor, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Lucas was already moving his face a mask of controlled fury. He ran to the back door and out into the storm. Eleanor heard him cursing, heard him calling for the others. She stayed with Pete, pressing cloth to the wound on his head, her mind refusing to accept what she'd just heard. They took them. Calloway's men had kidnapped Danny and Frank. Lucas returned, rain streaming off him, his eyes haunted. They're gone. Tracks lead north toward Calloway's estate. They took them on horseback, left maybe 5 minutes ago. Eleanor? His voice broke. They left a note. He handed her a soggy piece of paper. Eleanor's hand shook as she read the scrawled message by lamplight. Miss Wade, you have until noon tomorrow. Come to the Calloway mansion alone, unarmed, and agree to marry Mr. Calloway immediately. Bring a preacher. When the marriage is complete and the ranch transfers to Calloway ownership, your men will be released unharmed. Refuse or bring help, and they die. Their blood will be on your hands. The paper slipped from Eleanor's fingers. The world seemed to tilt sideways, and she grabbed the table to steady herself. This couldn't be happening. This was kidnapping, assault, extortion. This was so far beyond anything Calloway had done before that it felt like stepping into a nightmare. We get the marshal, Tom said from the doorway. We form a posse, we ride to Calloway's place, and they kill Danny and Frank the moment we're spotted. Lucas cut in. His voice was hollow. Calloway's not bluffing. He's desperate now. Desperate men don't make empty threats. So what do we do? Eleanor's voice sounded strange in her own ears, distant and thin. I can't let them die. But I can't marry him. I can't give him the ranch. That's exactly what he wants. I know. Lucas's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Which is why I'm going in, tonight. I'll get them out before noon. That's suicide. You don't even know where in the mansion he's holding them. Then I'll search every room until I find them. Eleanor, I'm not letting those boys die because of me. I'm the one who brought them into this fight. I'm the one who made Calloway desperate enough to do something this insane. This is my responsibility. No. Eleanor stood, her mind clearing her spine, straightening with the cold clarity of absolute certainty. This is my responsibility, my ranch, my fight. And if anyone's going to face Arthur Calloway, it's going to be me. Eleanor, no. I'm not negotiating Lucas. I'm going to Calloway's mansion at noon tomorrow, but I'm not going to surrender. I'm going to end this. The room went silent except for the rain hammering on the roof. Mrs. Chen, who'd been crying silently, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Miss Eleanor, he'll force you to marry him. He'll take everything. Not if I'm already married to someone else. Eleanor turned to face Lucas and saw understanding dawn in his green eyes. Eleanor, what are you? Marry me. Right now. Tonight. If I show up at Calloway's mansion tomorrow, already married, his whole plan falls apart. He can't force a married woman to marry him. The ranch can't transfer to him through marriage if I have a husband. And most importantly, it gives us leverage to negotiate for Danny and Frank's release without giving him what he wants. Lucas stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're talking about a fake marriage, a legal maneuver. I'm talking about survival. I'm talking about protecting my people and my land. I'm talking about using the law against him the same way he's been using it against us. Eleanor took a step toward Lucas. You said earlier that this ranch wasn't the only thing you were fighting for anymore. Did you mean that you know I did? Then marry me. Not because you love me, not because you want to, but because it's the smartest tactical move we have. We can annul it later if when this is over. But right now, right this moment, it's the one thing Calloway won't see coming. Mrs. Chen stood slowly. There's no preacher available at this hour in this storm. We don't need a preacher for it to be legal. Colorado recognizes common law marriage. Two people declaring themselves married in front of witnesses, that's sufficient. Eleanor looked around the room at the gathered men. You're all witnesses. Tom, you were a ship's captain before you came west, weren't you? You've performed marriages. Tom nodded slowly. I have, but Miss Eleanor, are you sure about this? Once it's done, even if you annul it later, people will talk. Your reputation. My reputation means nothing if my men are dead and my ranch is stolen. Lucas, I'm asking you, will you marry me? The silence stretched impossibly long. Eleanor watched emotions flicker across Lucas's face, shock, disbelief, calculation, and something else, something deeper and more complicated. Finally, he said, if we do this, we do it right. Not a fake marriage. Not something we're planning to annul the moment it's convenient. Eleanor's breath caught. Lucas, you're asking me to stand up in front of witnesses and swear to be your husband, to protect you, to stand by your side. Eleanor, I won't make those vows unless I mean them. So before you ask again, you need to understand if I say yes, I'm saying yes to all of it, the real thing, for as long as we both live. The kitchen seemed to contract until it was just the two of them standing in a circle of lamplight while the storm raged outside. Eleanor looked into Lucas's eyes and saw the truth there. He loved her. Had loved her maybe for longer than either of them had admitted. And he was giving her and out a chance to take back the impulsive proposal to find another way. But Eleanor didn't want another way. Then say yes, she whispered. Say yes to all of it, because I'm not asking you to fake anything. I'm asking you to be my husband, my partner, my equal in every way that matters. I'm asking you to stand with me tomorrow when we face Callaway, and then stand with me every day after. I'm asking you to help me build something real here, something that lasts. So yes, Lucas Rourke, I'm asking you to marry me. For real. Forever. What's your answer? Lucas reached out and took her hands. His calloused palms were warm against her cold fingers, and his touch was gentle despite the violence they'd just survived. My answer is yes. To all of it. To you. To forever. Tom cleared his throat. Well then, I suppose we're having a wedding. Someone fetch a Bible. The ceremony was brief and strange and perfect. They stood in the kitchen with rain drumming on the roof and lamplight flickering on the walls. Mrs. Chen produced Eleanor's mother's wedding ring kept safe all these years. Tom spoke the traditional words with quiet dignity, and when Lucas slipped that ring onto Eleanor's finger and said, I do, his voice was steady and sure. Then it was Eleanor's turn. She looked up at the man who'd walked into her life 3 months ago and changed everything. The drifter cowboy who'd become essential. The foreman who'd become so much more. I do, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Then, by the authority vested in me and in the presence of these witnesses, I pronounce you husband and wife. Lucas, you may kiss your bride. Lucas cupped Eleanor's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Are you sure? He murmured so quietly only she could hear. Once I kiss you, there's no going back. I've never been more sure of anything, Eleanor whispered back. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It lasted only a moment, but Eleanor felt it down to her bones. This was real. This was right. Whatever happened tomorrow at Callaway's mansion, whatever battles they still had to fight, she wouldn't face them alone anymore. When they broke apart, Mrs. Chen was crying again, but this time with joy. Your father would have loved this. A midnight wedding in a storm with you marrying a cowboy who's half in love with the land and fully in love with you. Fully in love is right, Lucas set his arm around Eleanor's waist. But we need to focus. Callaway's expecting a desperate unmarried woman at noon tomorrow. He's going to get a married woman with her husband at her side. That changes everything. He'll be furious, Tom said, and dangerous. Let him be furious. We'll have the law on our side. Kidnapping is a federal offense in the territories. Once we get Danny and Frank safe, Callaway's going to face consequences he can't buy or threaten his way out of. Lucas looked at Eleanor. But you're not going in there unarmed, and you're not going in alone. I don't care what the note said. Agreed. But we need to be smart about it. If Callaway sees an armed force approaching, he'll hurt the hostages. We need to appear to comply while actually being ready for anything. They spent the next hour planning. Pete, despite his injury, insisted on helping. They studied what they knew of Callaway's mansion layout from the times Eleanor and her father had been forced to attend social functions there. They identified entry points, hiding places, and escape routes. And they sent Tom riding through the storm to fetch the territorial marshal with instructions to gather a posse and be ready to move at noon. By the time false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they had something resembling a plan. It was risky and depended on perfect timing and more than a little luck, but it was better than nothing. Eleanor tried to sleep, but couldn't. She lay in bed listening to the rain diminish to a drizzle, thinking about what she'd done. She'd married Lucas Rourke, her foreman, a man she'd known for 3 months, a man who'd saved her ranch and her life, and probably her sanity, a man she loved desperately and completely. There was a soft knock at her door. Eleanor sat up. "Come in." Lucas entered, still dressed, his hair damp from the rain. "Couldn't sleep either." "Too much to think about." "I know the feeling." He sat on the edge of her bed, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Eleanor, I want you to know what happened tonight, the wedding. I don't expect anything from you. I know it was necessary because of the situation, and I meant what I said about it being real, but I also understand if you need time to—" Eleanor reached out and took his hand. "Lucas, stop. I married you because I wanted to, because you're the best man I've ever known, because when I think about the future, about running this ranch and building a life, I can't imagine doing it without you. The timing was sudden, yes. The circumstances were desperate, but the feelings were real, are real." Lucas threaded his fingers through hers. "I'm afraid," he admitted quietly. "Not of Calloway, not of the fight tomorrow, but of what I feel for you. It's so big it scares me. I've been alone so long I forgot what it felt like to need someone. And I need you, Eleanor. That terrifies me." "I know. I'm terrified too, but maybe that's how you know it's real, when it's scary enough to run from, but important enough to stay for." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together, as partners, as husband and wife. Yes, yes." Lucas lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Try to rest. Few more hours until sunrise, and then we have a bastard to face and good men to rescue." He stood to leave, but Eleanor held on to his hand. "Stay. Please, just until I fall asleep. I don't want to be alone right now." Lucas hesitated only a moment, then nodded. He stretched out on top of the covers beside her, fully clothed, and Eleanor curled against his side with her head on his shoulder. She felt his arm come around her, holding her safe, and for the first time in months she felt truly protected. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Lucas replied. "Now, sleep. Tomorrow, we win this." Eleanor closed her eyes and impossibly slept. She woke to bright sunlight streaming through her window and Lucas gone from the bed. For a moment, panic seized her. Had it all been a dream? The attack, the kidnapping, the wedding. But then she saw her mother's ring on her finger and knew it was all devastatingly real. She dressed quickly in her best riding clothes, dark trousers, a white blouse, her father's leather vest. If she was facing Arthur Calloway today, she'd do it looking like the rancher she was, not some delicate woman to be intimidated. She strapped on her gun belt with her father's revolver and checked her reflection in the mirror. She looked terrified. Good. Fear would keep her sharp. Downstairs, she found the house in organized chaos. Mrs. Chen had prepared a large breakfast that no one seemed able to eat. The men were checking weapons and loading supplies, and Lucas stood at the head of the table, papers spread out before him, his face set in lines of grim determination. He looked up when Eleanor entered, and something softened in his expression. "Morning, wife." The word sent a thrill through her. "Morning, husband. How's Pete?" "Resting. He wanted to come today, but Mrs. Chen threatened to tie him to the bed if he tried. The wound's not serious, but at his age, we're not taking chances." Lucas gestured to the papers. "Tom got back an hour ago. Marshal Reeves is gathering a posse. They'll be positioned around Calloway's estate by 11:30. If things go wrong, they'll move in fast. And if things go right, then we get Danny and Frank out safely, and Calloway gets arrested for kidnapping, assault, arson, and about 6 other charges we've documented." Lucas met her eyes. "But Eleanor, you need to understand Calloway is desperate and cornered. Those are the most dangerous kind of men. If it comes down to it, if he threatens you, I'm taking the shot. Husband's prerogative." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the gravity of the situation. "Noted, but try to take him alive if possible. I want him to stand trial. I want everyone to see what he did. We'll do our best." The ride to Calloway's estate took 90 minutes. Eleanor, Lucas, and Jim rode together with the others spread out in a loose perimeter, hidden, but ready to close in if needed. The day was bright and clear after the storm, the kind of beautiful Colorado morning that made Eleanor's heart ache with love for this land. Calloway's mansion rose from the prairie like an insult to everything Eleanor valued. It was massive, ostentatious, a monument to wealth and power. 3 stories of imported stone and timber with more windows than any house needed, and a circular drive lined with trees that must have cost a fortune to transport and plant in this dry climate. They stopped at the front gate. A man stepped out of the gatehouse, rifle in hand. "Miss Wade, right on time. You alone, like Mr. Calloway specified?" "I'm with my husband," Eleanor said clearly. "And one additional hand. Mr. Calloway neglected to account for the fact that I got married last night. I trust that won't be a problem." The guard's eyes widened. He hadn't been expecting this. "Wait here." He disappeared into the mansion, and Eleanor felt Lucas tense beside her. "Steady," she murmured. "This is the part where he realizes his plan is falling apart." 5 minutes later, Arthur Calloway himself emerged from the mansion. Even from a distance, Eleanor could see the rage in his posture, the way his hands clenched at his sides. He stalked down the drive toward them, and when he got close enough, she saw his face was purple with fury. "What is this?" he snarled. "What kind of trick are you trying to pull?" "No trick, Mr. Calloway. I got married last night. This is my husband, Lucas Rourke. You know him, I believe. You tried to bribe him once." Eleanor kept her voice steady and cold. "Now you have 2 of my men held hostage. I'm here as your note demanded. What happens next is up to you." Calloway's eyes flicked between Eleanor and Lucas, calculation warring with fury. "You married your foreman. How romantically desperate. But it changes nothing. You'll divorce him, marry me, or your men die. It's that simple." "Actually, it's not," Lucas said. "Forcing someone to divorce their spouse under threat of murder is still coercion and still illegal. Even if Eleanor agreed, any judge would invalidate it. Your plan is dead, Calloway. You lost. Now release Danny and Frank before you add more charges to your list." "My list?" Calloway laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think I'm worried about charges? I own half the territorial government. No one's going to touch me." "The federal marshal might disagree," Eleanor said. "Kidnapping crosses state and territorial lines. That makes it a federal crime. You can't bribe your way out of that." Calloway's smile never wavered, but something dangerous glinted in his eyes. "Then I suppose we're at an impasse. You won't give me what I want. I won't give you what you want. Where does that leave us?" "It leaves you as a kidnapper facing life in prison. Or worse," Lucas said flatly. "Calloway, you've lost. Accept it with whatever grace you can muster and release the hostages. Maybe cooperating will convince the judge to show leniency." For a long moment, Calloway just stared at them. Then he smiled, a terrible smile that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "No," he said simply. "I don't think so. I think instead I'll show you what happens to people who defy me. Guard, bring out the prisoners." 2 of Calloway's men emerged from the mansion, half dragging Danny Morrison and Frank Yu between them. Both young men had been beaten, their faces swollen and bloodied, but they were alive. Danny's eyes went wide when he saw Eleanor and Lucas. "Miss Eleanor, don't do whatever he wants," the boy called out. "We'll be fine, just—" One of the guards hit him, and Danny's head snapped back. Lucas started to dismount, his hand going to his gun, but Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Not yet. Trust me." Calloway walked to where the prisoners were being held. He pulled a revolver from his jacket and pressed it to Danny's temple. "Last chance, Eleanor. Agree to annul your sham marriage and wed me, or this boy dies right here, right now. And then the other one. And then maybe I'll start on the rest of your ranch hands. How many deaths are you willing to accept for your pride?" Eleanor felt the world narrow to this moment, this choice. She could see the cold calculation in Calloway's eyes. He meant it. He would kill Danny. He was past the point of rational thought, operating on pure ego and rage at being defied. But she also saw something else. Movement in the mansion windows. Shapes positioning themselves. Marshal Reeves and his posse using the distraction to get into place. "All right," Eleanor said, and she made her voice break, made herself sound defeated. All right, you win. I'll annul the marriage. I'll marry you. Just please don't hurt them. Please. She saw Lucas's head snap toward her, saw the betrayal flash across his face, and she hated herself for putting it there. But she also saw understanding dawn. A heartbeat later, he knew her too well to believe she'd actually surrender. Calloway's smile widened. Smart girl. Dismount. Both of you. Leave your weapons. We'll go inside and make this official. Eleanor and Lucas climbed down from their horses. Eleanor unbuckled her gun belt, slowly letting it fall to the ground. Lucas did the same, though she could feel the coiled violence in him, ready to explode at the first opportunity. They walked toward Calloway, hands raised, appearing to surrender. And with every step, Eleanor counted, silently waiting for the signal that would mean the marshal was ready to move. They were 10 feet away when it came a sharp whistle from somewhere to the east. Now! Eleanor screamed, and she dove to the side. Lucas was already moving faster than thought. He tackled the guard holding Danny, and the young man broke free. Marshal Reeves and 6 deputies burst from the mansion, guns drawn. More men appeared from cover around the estate perimeter. Calloway spun his gun, tracking wildly, looking for a target. He found Eleanor started to aim, and that's when Lucas threw himself between them. The gunshot was thunderous in the quiet morning. Eleanor saw Lucas stagger, saw red bloom on his shoulder, and her heart stopped. But he didn't fall. He kept moving forward, and his fist connected with Calloway's jaw with all the force of 3 months of suppressed fury. Calloway went down hard. His gun skittered across the gravel. Marshal Reeves was there, immediately snapping handcuffs on the cattle baron's wrists while he was still dazed. Arthur Calloway. You're under arrest for kidnapping, assault with intent to kill, arson, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other charges we'll sort out later. You have the right to remain silent, though. From what I've seen, you probably should have exercised that right about 3 months ago. But Eleanor wasn't listening. She was running to Lucas, who dropped to one knee, his hand pressed to his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, but his eyes were clear and focused on her face. I'm all right, he said before she could ask. Bullet went through clean. Hurts like hell, but I'll live. You idiot! Eleanor sobbed, pulling off her neckerchief and pressing it to his wound. You stupid, brave, wonderful idiot. Why would you do that? Why would you step in front of a bullet? Because I love you, because you're my wife, because some things are worth dying for, though I'm extremely glad I don't have to. Lucas winced as she tightened the makeshift bandage. Did we win? Tell me we won. We won, Eleanor said, laughing through her tears. Lucas, we won. Around them, the chaos was resolving. Calloway's men had surrendered without much fight once their boss was in custody. Danny and Frank were being tended to by the doc who'd ridden with the marshal's posse, and Arthur Calloway himself sat in the dirt, handcuffed and furious, his empire crumbling around him. Marshal Reeves walked over, his grizzled face creased in satisfaction. That was some fine work, Mrs. Rourke. Or should I say, Mrs. Wade Rourke. Either way, you two just made my job a whole lot easier. We've been trying to pin something solid on Calloway for years, but he's always been too careful. Today he got sloppy. Witnesses attempted murder in front of a federal officer, kidnapping victims who can testify. He's done. What happens now? Eleanor asked. Now I take him to Denver for trial. Federal prison if I have anything to say about it. And I'll need statements from all of you. What happened last night, the arson, all of it. Build the strongest case possible so this bastard never sees freedom again. We'll give you everything, Lucas said. Every note, every piece of evidence we've collected over the past 3 months. He's not walking away from this. Calloway, being hauled to his feet by deputies, fixed Eleanor with a hate-filled stare. You think this is over? You think you've won? You're still broke. You still can't make your mortgage payments. The bank will still foreclose. All you've done is delay the inevitable. Eleanor walked over to him, looked him dead in the eye, and smiled. Wrong. We're hosting a cattle auction in 2 weeks. Already have buyers confirmed from 3 states. Quality breeding stock that's going to fetch premium prices. We'll make those mortgage payments and have enough left over to rebuild. Wade Ranch is going to thrive, Mr. Calloway. And you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life in a cell knowing you failed. She turned away from him, dismissing him completely. Marshal, he's all yours. And thank you for the rescue and for everything else. My pleasure, ma'am. Always happy to take down a bully. Marshal Reeves tipped his hat. Get that husband of yours to a doctor. Bullet wound in the shoulders, nothing to take lightly. The ride back to Wade Ranch felt surreal. Danny and Frank, despite their injuries, were in high spirits, recounting their captivity and rescue with the enthusiasm of young men who'd survived something terrible and come out the other side. Jim rode ahead to tell the others the good news, and Eleanor sat behind Lucas on his horse, her arms around his waist, feeling his warmth and breathing in the scent of him, and thanking every god she could name that the bullet hadn't been 6 inches to the right. Mrs. Chen met them at the ranch house with tears of relief and joy. She fussed over Lucas's shoulder, cleaning and bandaging it properly, while scolding him in a mix of English and Cantonese for being so reckless. Pete hobbled out of his room to shake Lucas's hand and congratulate Eleanor on both the victory and her marriage. It was late afternoon before Eleanor and Lucas finally had a moment alone. They stood on the front porch watching the sun paint the western peaks in shades of orange and gold, and for the first time in months, Eleanor felt like she could breathe without fear. "It's really over," she said softly. "Calloway's in custody. We have a path forward. We're going to make it." "We are," Lucas agreed. His arm was in a sling, but he still managed to pull Eleanor against his side with his good hand. "How does it feel to be a wife and a successful rancher all in the span of 12 hours? "Exhausting, terrifying, wonderful." Eleanor looked up at him. "Lucas, I need to know what we said last night, what we promised. Did you mean it? The real marriage part? Because things happened so fast and I would understand if you wanted to." Lucas silenced her with a kiss. It was deeper than the brief one during their wedding ceremony, full of promise and passion and everything they'd been holding back for months. When he finally pulled away, Eleanor's head was spinning. "Does that answer your question?" he asked, his voice rough. "Pretty definitively, yes." "Good. Because Eleanor Rourke, you're stuck with me now. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, and we've definitely covered the poorer part in sickness and in health till death do us part. I meant every word I said last night." "So did I." Eleanor rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. "I love you. I loved you before I married you. I'll love you tomorrow and every day after. You saved my ranch and my life and my sanity. You gave me back hope when I'd forgotten what it felt like. You're everything I never knew I needed." "Right back at you," Lucas murmured into her hair. "Though, for the record, you saved yourself. I just helped." They stood there as the sun set, husband and wife partners in every sense that mattered. And though challenges still lay ahead, the auction to organize the ranch, to rebuild a life to forge together, Eleanor felt nothing but absolute certainty that they would face it all and triumph, because they had each other. And that it turned out was everything. The days following Calloway's arrest passed in a blur of activity that felt both frantic and strangely peaceful. Eleanor woke each morning to find Lucas already up, despite his injury, working one-handed to prepare for the auction that would determine their future. His shoulder healed slowly. The bandages changed daily by Mrs. Chen's careful hands, but his determination never wavered. "You need to rest," Eleanor told him on the third morning, finding him in the stable trying to brush down Thunder, the Montana bull with his good arm. "I'll rest when we're solvent," Lucas replied, not breaking rhythm. "This animal needs to look his absolute best. He's the star of the auction, the foundation of everything we're selling." Eleanor took the brush from his hand. "Then let me do it. You can supervise and tell me if I'm doing it wrong, but Lucas, you were shot 4 days ago. Your body needs time to heal." "My body can heal after we save the ranch." But he stepped back, letting her take over the grooming. Little more pressure on the hindquarters. That's where buyers look first on a bull-checking muscle development. They worked together in comfortable silence, and Eleanor marveled at how natural this felt, working side-by-side partners in every sense. They'd been married less than a week, and already she couldn't remember what life had been like before Lucas. The ranch felt different now, not just hers but theirs, a shared dream instead of a solitary burden. "Eleanor," Lucas said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you about why I came to Wade Ranch in the first place." Eleanor's hand stilled on Thunder's flank. "All right." Lucas leaned against the stall door, his face troubled. "I told you the Double R sold after Bill Richardson died. That was true, But what I didn't tell you was that I had nowhere else to go. I'd been drifting for 12 years because I was running from something. From someone, really. Who? My father. He owned a small ranch in Texas, and he wanted me to take it over. Wanted me to marry the daughter of his business partner, wanted me to live exactly the life he'd planned for me. But I didn't want that life. I didn't love that girl. And when I told him I was leaving, he disowned me. Said if I walked out that door, I was no son of his. Lucas's voice was raw with old pain. So I left. I was 14, and I've been running ever since, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, never letting myself care too much about anything, because caring meant risk. Eleanor set down the brush and moved to stand in front of him. But you stopped running when you came here. I did, because something about this place, about you, made me want to stay, made me want to fight for something that mattered. Lucas met her eyes. I was so tired of drifting, Eleanor, so tired of being alone. And then I saw you standing in that study, desperate and brave and trying so hard to hold everything together, and I thought maybe here, maybe this is where I finally stop running. I'm glad you stayed, Eleanor whispered. I'm glad you stopped running, because I can't imagine doing this without you. You wouldn't have to imagine it if I'd been honest from the start. But I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew I was a man running from his past, you'd think I'd run from this too when things got hard. Lucas reached up with his good hand and cupped her cheek. I need you to know I'm not running anymore. Whatever happens, I'm staying. This is my home now. You're my home. Eleanor turned her face to kiss his palm. Then we're both home. Because I was running too in my own way. Running from the truth that I couldn't do this alone, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that letting someone in didn't mean surrendering control. She smiled. We're quite a pair of former runners, aren't we? Best kind, Lucas said, and kissed her softly. They were interrupted by Tom Bridges calling from the yard. Lucas Ryder's coming in. Looks like buyers arriving early to see the stock. Lucas pulled away with visible reluctance. Duty calls, but Eleanor, thank you. For listening, for understanding, for being you. Always, she promised. The next 10 days were a whirlwind. Buyers arrived from Denver, Cheyenne, Kansas City, even as far as San Francisco. They walked the pastures, inspected the breeding stock, asked detailed questions about bloodlines and health records. Eleanor and Lucas worked as a seamless team, she handling the business negotiations, while he provided the technical expertise on the animals. Your bull is exceptional, a buyer from Denver said, watching thunder pace in his pen. Best confirmation I've seen in 5 years. What are you asking? Eleanor quoted a price that made the man's eyebrows rise, but Lucas had coached her well. He's worth every penny, she said firmly. His offspring have a 98% survival rate and mature 20% faster than average. You won't find better genetics west of the Mississippi. She's not wrong, another buyer interjected. He was an older gentleman named Howard Chen, and he'd spent 2 hours examining the heifers. I knew your father, Miss Wade. Thomas always had an eye for quality stock. Looks like you inherited that eye. Actually, my husband deserves most of the credit, Eleanor said, and she felt a thrill saying those words, my husband. Lucas has managed the breeding program for the past 3 months. Every animal you see today is in prime condition because of his expertise. Lucas, standing nearby with his arms still in a sling, looked embarrassed by the praise. But Eleanor saw several buyers glance at him with new respect. A foreman who'd married the owner and clearly knew his business, that was someone they could trust. The auction itself was held on a bright July morning with a temporary platform erected in the main pasture and seating for over 100 people. Eleanor stood at the edge, watching as buyers took their places, and her stomach churned with nerves. Everything depended on the next few hours. If the auction went well, they'd make enough to save the ranch. If it failed, all their work, all their sacrifice would be for nothing. Lucas appeared at her side, dressed in his best clothes. Clean denims, a pressed white shirt, a leather vest that Mrs. Chen had repaired and polished until it gleamed. Even with his arm in a sling, he looked commanding, confident, every inch the successful ranch foreman. Ready? He asked. Terrified. You. Same. But we've done everything we can. The stock is perfect, the organization is solid, and we've got buyers from 3 states here. Whatever happens next is out of our hands. I hate that feeling. Lucas smiled. I know. But sometimes you have to trust that the work you've already done is enough. He took her hand with his good one. We're going to be fine, Eleanor. I can feel it. Tom Bridges served as auctioneer, his booming voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wade Ranch. We're offering today some of the finest breeding stock in Colorado, starting with lot number 1, a 3-year-old heifer from championship bloodlines in perfect health, ready to calve this fall. The bidding started slow but built quickly. The heifer went for a good price, then another, then another. Eleanor watched the numbers climb, her heart pounding with each successful sale. They were doing it. It was actually working. Then came Thunder's turn. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the crown jewel of today's auction. This Montana-bred bull represents 5 generations of careful breeding with documented offspring, showing exceptional growth rates, disease resistance, and temperament. He's proven himself in every way that matters, and he'll transform your breeding program. We'll start the bidding at $500. Eleanor gasped softly. That was more than twice what she'd expected as a starting price. But Tom had insisted the bull was worth it. 500, called Howard Chen. 600, countered the Denver buyer. 700. The numbers climbed higher and higher. Eleanor felt Lucas's hand tighten around hers. They watched in amazement as Thunder's price soared past $1,000, then $1,200, then $1,500. Finally, at $1,750, a staggering sum that represented nearly a year's operating budget. Howard Chen won the bid. The crowd erupted in applause, and Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. Lucas, we actually did it." "Not yet," he said, but his voice was thick with emotion. "There's still the rest of the stock. But Eleanor, that bull alone just paid 3 months of mortgage." The auction continued through the afternoon. Every animal sold, most for prices well above Eleanor's expectations. When Tom finally brought down his gavel on the last lot, Eleanor couldn't believe the total Tom calculated and announced. Final tally for today's auction, $8,465. The crowd applauded again, and buyers came forward to settle their accounts and arrange transport for their purchases. Eleanor moved through it all in a daze, shaking hands and signing bills of sale and accepting congratulations. $8,000. It was more money than she'd seen in her entire life. When the last buyer had departed and the sun was setting over the mountains, Eleanor finally let herself collapse onto the porch steps. Lucas sat beside her, his good arm around her shoulders, and they watched the gold light fade to purple twilight. "We can make the mortgage payment," Eleanor said, still not quite believing it. "We can pay the bank, clear the debt, and still have money left over for repairs and restocking." "We can do more than that," Lucas said. "We can hire more hands, rebuild the barn properly, maybe even expand the herd next spring. Eleanor, you just proved that Wade Ranch isn't just surviving, it's thriving." Eleanor leaned against him, exhausted and elated and overwhelmed. "We proved it. This wasn't just me. This was us together. Your expertise, your leadership, your belief that we could actually pull this off." "Partnership," Lucas said simply. "That's what marriage is supposed to be, right? 2 people working toward the same goal, supporting each other, building something bigger than either could build alone. Is that what we have? A real partnership?" "I think so. Though I'll admit I'm still getting used to the idea of having a partner. 12 years of drifting alone, it becomes a habit." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor, there's something else I need to tell you, something I've been carrying around for weeks now, waiting for the right moment." Eleanor's heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" "The day I nearly fell off that ladder, the day I was fixing the stable roof and lost my balance. You remember that?" "Of course. You scared me half to death. I almost told you then. Almost said the words I'd been holding back since probably the second week I was here." Lucas turned to look at her, his green eyes serious in the fading light. "I love you, Eleanor. I've loved you from the first sunset we watched together when you asked me about my dreams and actually listened to the answer. I've loved you through every crisis and every victory. I loved you before I married you, and I'll love you long after we're both dust." That's what I almost said that day, and what I've been trying to say every day since. The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound and absolutely perfect. Eleanor felt tears spill over again, But these were tears of joy, of relief, of a happiness so complete it felt like her chest might burst. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking. "I think I've loved you since that first interview when you looked me in the eye and offered to help me fight for something that mattered. You've been my rock, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life all at once. And Lucas, I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to keep pretending this marriage is just a tactical move or a legal maneuver. I want it to be real in every way. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Lucas's eyes darkened. "I understand, but Eleanor, I want to do this right. I want to court you properly, give you the romance you deserve, make sure you have no doubts." "I have no doubts," Eleanor interrupted. "I married you in a kitchen during a storm with mud on my boots and fear in my heart. And it was perfect, because it was us real and honest and brave. I don't need fancy courtship, Lucas. I just need you." He kissed her, then deep and slow and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "All right then," he murmured. "No more waiting, no more pretending, just us building a life together." "Just us," Eleanor agreed. They sat on the porch steps as the stars came out talking about plans for the ranch, about dreams for the future, about the life they would build together. And somewhere in the middle of discussing whether to expand the north pasture or invest in new equipment, Eleanor remembered something. "Oh God," she said, sitting up straight. "The necklace. I completely forgot about the necklace." Lucas looked confused. "What necklace?" "My mother's diamond necklace. My father gave it to her on their 10th anniversary. It was worth a small fortune. She wore it exactly once to some fancy dinner in Denver, then said it was too ostentatious for ranch life and put it away." Eleanor stood, excitement building. "She hid it somewhere in the house, said it was our emergency fund in case we ever truly needed it. Lucas, with everything that's happened, I completely forgot we have that safety net." "You're saying you have a diamond necklace hidden somewhere that could help pay off the mortgage?" "If I can find it. My mother told me where it was hidden right before she died, but I was 14 and upset, and I only half listened." Eleanor paced the porch, trying to remember. "She said something about where the stories live and behind the dreams. I thought she was being poetic because of the fever, but maybe she was giving me actual clues." Lucas stood too. "Where the stories live. Could that mean the library? Does the ranch house have a library?" "My father's study. He kept all his books there, ranching manuals, novels, everything." Eleanor grabbed Lucas's good hand. "Come on, let's search." They went into the study, lighting lamps against the darkness. The room was exactly as Thomas Wade had left it, books lining the shelves, papers still scattered across the desk. Eleanor started pulling books down, checking behind them, while Lucas examined the furniture for hidden compartments. "Behind the dreams," Eleanor muttered. "What does that even mean?" "Could be literal," Lucas suggested. He was studying the bookshelves carefully. "What were your father's dreams? What did he love most?" "Ranching, the land, Colorado. He used to say that he dreamed in colors, the gold of wheat, the green of grass, the blue of mountain sky." Eleanor froze. "The painting. There's a painting in his bedroom, a landscape of the ranch at sunset. My mother painted it as a gift. He called it his dream of home." They practically ran to her father's bedroom, a room Eleanor had avoided since his death, because it hurt too much to see his empty bed, his clothes still hanging in the wardrobe, his reading glasses on the nightstand. But now she forced herself to cross to the wall where the painting hung. It was beautiful if amateur her mother had captured the essence of the ranch at golden hour, with the mountains purple in the distance, and the ranch house small but sturdy in the foreground. Eleanor carefully lifted the painting off its hook and turned it around. Taped to the back of the frame was a small leather pouch. "Oh my God," Eleanor breathed. "Lucas, I found it." With shaking hands, she opened the pouch and tipped the contents into her palm. A necklace spilled out, catching the lamplight and throwing it back in 1,000 rainbow sparks. Diamonds and sapphires arranged in an intricate pattern, more beautiful than Eleanor remembered, and heavy the weight of it in her hand spoke of significant value. Lucas let out a low whistle. "That's not just a necklace. That's a fortune." It was my father's way of taking care of us even after he was gone, Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. He knew where it was hidden. He must have known, but he never touched it, never sold it because he wanted to leave us this security. Then we use it the way he intended to save his dream, to keep the ranch he loved. Lucas put his arm around her. Tomorrow we take it to Denver. Get it appraised, and between the auction proceeds, and this will clear every debt Wade Ranch has. Your father's legacy is secure. Eleanor clutched the necklace to her chest and let herself cry for her father, for the sacrifices he'd made for the love that had survived even death. Lucas held her through it all, his steady presence, the anchor she needed. The trip to Denver took 2 days. Eleanor and Lucas rode together, the necklace secured in a locked box that never left Eleanor's sight. Tom and Jim accompanied them as guards because $8,000 in bank drafts plus a valuable necklace made them targets for any bandits brave or stupid enough to try robbery. But the journey was peaceful. They rode through summer green valleys and over passes still spotted with snow, and Eleanor felt something settle in her soul. This land, this life, this man beside her, it was everything she'd ever wanted, even before she'd known to want it. In Denver, a jeweler appraised the necklace at $2,300, and Eleanor nearly fainted. Combined with the auction proceeds, they had more than enough to pay off the entire mortgage, with money left over. The bank manager, a stern man named Frederick Simmons, who'd been pressuring Eleanor for months, looked stunned when they walked into his office with payment in full. "Mrs. Rourke," he said, having to correct himself from Miss Wade. "This is unexpected. I was under the impression the ranch was failing." "You were under the wrong impression," Eleanor said coolly. "As you can see, Wade Ranch is solvent and thriving. I'll take the deed and clear title, please. And, Mr. Simmons, the next time a woman tells you she can manage her own affairs, perhaps you should believe her." The banker's face reddened, but he processed the payment and handed over the documents. Eleanor walked out of that bank with her head high and her husband at her side, and she'd never felt more powerful in her life. They celebrated that night at the finest hotel in Denver, splurging on a room with a real bathtub and a meal that didn't involve beans or salt pork. And finally they had their wedding night, months late, earned through blood and sweat and tears, but worth every moment of waiting. The ride back to Wade Ranch took on a dreamlike quality. Eleanor kept touching the papers in her saddlebag, the proof of ownership, the clear title that said this land was hers, theirs free and clear. No more debt, no more threats, no more Arthur Calloway lurking in the shadows. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked as they crested the final ridge before home. "Everything. Nothing. How different things are now compared to 6 months ago." Eleanor smiled at him. 6 months ago, I was alone and terrified and convinced I was going to lose everything. Now I'm married to the best man I've ever known. The ranch is saved and the future looks brighter than I ever imagined possible. It doesn't feel real." "It's real," Lucas assured her. "And it's just the beginning. We have so much ahead of us, Eleanor. Years of building and growing and making this place everything it can be. Years of sunrises and hard work and quiet evenings on the porch. Years of being partners in every sense that matters. Years of loving you," Eleanor added. "That's what I'm looking forward to most. Years and years of loving you." They rode into the ranch yard to find everyone waiting: Mrs. Chen, Pete, Danny, Frank, Jim, Samuel, Tom, all the hands they'd hired. Someone had strung lanterns across the porch, and there was music playing from somewhere, and the smell of Mrs. Chen's cooking filled the air. "Surprise!" Mrs. Chen called out. "We're celebrating your victory properly, and your marriage since we haven't had a proper reception yet." Eleanor felt tears threaten again, but these were happy tears. She dismounted and found herself swept into hugs and congratulations. Pete shook Lucas's good hand so hard, Eleanor worried he'd injure it. Danny kept saying, "I can't believe you did it. I can't believe we actually won." The celebration lasted long into the night. They roasted a pig, drank slightly questionable whiskey, and danced to music played on Pete's ancient fiddle. Eleanor danced with Lucas despite his injured shoulder, and she danced with all the hands, and she even danced with Mrs. Chen, both of them laughing until they couldn't breathe. As the party wound down and people began drifting off to bed, Eleanor found herself alone on the porch with Lucas one more time. The lanterns had burned low, casting soft golden light, and the summer night was warm and perfect. "This is what I was fighting for," Eleanor said quietly. "Not just the land or the buildings or even the cattle. This community family, people who care about each other and work together and celebrate victories together. That's what makes a ranch a home." "And you built it," Lucas said. "You created this community by being brave enough to ask for help, strong enough to lead, and wise enough to value people over pride." "We built it," Eleanor corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You know that, right? You're not just my husband or my foreman. You're my partner in every way that matters. This ranch, this life, this future, it's ours together." Lucas pulled her close with his good arm, and she melted into his embrace. "I know," he said, "and I'm grateful every day that I walked through your door that March morning. Best decision I ever made, taking a chance on a desperate ranch owner with fire in her eyes and hope in her heart. Best decision I ever made was hiring a drifter cowboy with nothing but his word and his skills," Eleanor replied. "Look how far we've come." They stood there in the gentle night, holding each other, looking out over the land they'd fought so hard to save. The ranch was quiet now, peaceful, secure. No more threats lurked in the darkness. No more desperate gambles needed to be made. They'd won truly and completely, and the future stretched before them, full of possibility. "What do we do now?" Eleanor asked. "Now that the crisis is over and we're actually safe." Lucas was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We live," he said simply. "We run the ranch, we build our life together, we maybe start thinking about a family someday. We do all the normal, beautiful, boring things that people in love get to do when they're not fighting for survival." "That sounds perfect," Eleanor said. "Absolutely perfect." As they turned to go inside, Eleanor took one last look at the ranch, at the buildings standing strong against the star-filled sky, at the pastures rolling away into darkness, at the mountains standing eternal watch over it all. This was home. This was hers. This was theirs. And she'd never felt more grateful, more blessed, or more certain that every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of fear and doubt had been worth it to arrive at this moment, in this place, with this man. The ranch heiress who'd hired a drifter and found a partner. The desperate woman who'd taken a chance and discovered love. The fighter who'd refused to surrender and won everything that mattered. This was her story, their story, and it was far from over. Inside the house, Mrs. Chen had left a lamp burning low in their bedroom, Eleanor's old room now shared with Lucas. Their room, their life, their future. Lucas closed the door behind them and pulled Eleanor into his arms. "Mrs. Rourke," he said softly, "how does it feel to be a woman who saved her father's ranch, defeated a corrupt cattle baron, and married the luckiest man in Colorado?" Eleanor laughed, the sound full of joy and relief and perfect contentment. "It feels like coming home," she said. "Like finally, after so much struggle, everything is exactly as it should be." "It is," Lucas agreed, and he kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise, and Eleanor knew that whatever the future held, whatever challenges might come, they would face them together, as partners, as lovers, as husband and wife, and that she thought as she kissed him back was worth more than all the land and cattle and diamonds in the world. The ranch was saved, the battle was won, the love was real, and the best part? This wasn't an ending at all. It was just the beginning. The seasons turned as they always had over Wade Ranch, but now they turned with a different quality, a sense of peace and prosperity that settled over the land like morning dew. Summer faded into autumn with its riot of gold aspens and crisp mountain air. Winter came with its blanket of snow that made the ranch look like something from a storybook. Spring arrived with newborn calves and the sweet scent of new grass. And then summer returned, bringing with it the anniversary of the day everything changed. Eleanor stood at the window of the ranch house bedroom, watching the sun rise over the eastern peaks, and marveled at how different her life was now compared to a year ago. A year ago, she'd been desperate and alone, drowning in debt and fear. Now, she was Eleanor Rourke, wife of the finest foreman in Colorado, owner of a thriving ranch, and carrying a secret that made her heart race every time she thought about it. She heard Lucas stirring behind her, felt his arms slide around her waist as he came to stand at her back. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a small scar that Eleanor sometimes traced with her fingers in quiet moments. "You're up early," he murmured against her neck. couldn't sleep. Too much excitement, I think. It's hard to believe it's been a year. Eleanor leaned back against him, feeling his warmth, his solid presence that had become as essential to her as breathing. A year since we got married in a kitchen during a storm. A year since we faced down Calloway. A year since everything changed. Best year of my life, Lucas said simply. Though I'm biased because I got to spend it with you. Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. Lucas, there's something I need to tell you, something I've been waiting to say until I was absolutely certain. She saw concern flicker across his face. Is everything all right? The ranch is perfect. Everything is perfect, which is why the timing feels right to tell you that. Eleanor took a breath, let it out, and said the words that would change their lives again. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby. Lucas went completely still. His green eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no sound came out, and for a long moment he simply stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. Then his face broke into the most beautiful smile Eleanor had ever seen. A baby, he breathed. Eleanor, are you sure? When? How? Eleanor laughed at the jumble of questions. I'm sure. I've known for about 3 weeks, but wanted to wait until I was absolutely certain before telling you. Mrs. Chen confirmed it. She's delivered enough babies to know the signs. I'm about 2 months along, which means the baby should arrive in late winter, probably February. Lucas whooped an actual joyful shout that probably woke half the ranch and lifted Eleanor off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her down carefully as if she were made of glass. We're having a baby. We're going to be parents. I'm going to be a father. You're going to be a wonderful father, Eleanor said, her eyes filling with happy tears. The baby is so lucky to have you. Lucky to have us both, Lucas corrected. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to Eleanor's still flat stomach. Hello in there, little one. This is your father speaking. I'm very excited to meet you, and I promise to do my best by you. You're going to grow up on the most beautiful ranch in Colorado with the most amazing mother in the world, and more family than you'll know what to do with. We're going to love you so much. Eleanor ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed by the tenderness in his voice. You're already talking to the baby. Gotta start early. Make sure they know they're wanted and loved from day one. Lucas stood and pulled Eleanor close. Thank you. Thank you for this gift, for this future, for everything. Thank you for giving me a reason to believe in futures again, Eleanor replied. A year ago, I couldn't see past the next mortgage payment. Now I'm planning for our child's first birthday, their first steps teaching them to ride. Lucas, we built this. We built a life worth bringing new life into. They stood there in the morning light, holding each other, contemplating the miracle of creation and the future they were building together. Then Mrs. Chen's voice floated up from downstairs, calling them to breakfast, and they reluctantly broke apart to face the day. At breakfast, Eleanor and Lucas shared their news with Mrs. Chen, who immediately burst into tears of joy and began planning nursery arrangements and discussing dietary needs for pregnant women. Pete shook Lucas's hand so many times, Eleanor worried he'd wear it out, and Danny, who'd grown another 3 inches and filled out with muscle over the past year, grinned like he'd won a prize himself. That's amazing news, Miss Eleanor. Mrs. Rourke. I still can't get used to calling you that. Danny helped himself to more eggs. A baby on the ranch. That's going to be something special. It is, Eleanor agreed. And Danny, you can keep calling me Miss Eleanor if it's easier. I don't stand on ceremony with family. Family, Danny repeated, looking pleased. I like that. The day passed in a flurry of activity. The anniversary celebration was planned for that evening, and there was much to prepare. Neighboring ranchers had been invited. People who'd once viewed Eleanor with suspicion or pity now came as friends and allies. The community that had formed in the aftermath of Calloway's defeat was strong and genuine, built on mutual respect and shared struggle. Around mid-morning, a rider approached from town. Eleanor recognized him as Deputy Marshal James Reeves' nephew of the territorial marshal who'd arrested Calloway. Her stomach clenched with old fear, but Lucas put a steadying hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Rourke, Mr. Rourke, the deputy said, dismounting, I've got news from Denver. Thought you'd want to hear it directly. Calloway's trial, Eleanor asked. Concluded yesterday. Jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The deputy's face was grim with satisfaction. Guilty on all counts: kidnapping, attempted murder, arson, conspiracy, assault. Judge sentenced him to 25 years in territorial prison, no possibility of parole. He'll be an old man before he sees freedom again, if he lives that long. Eleanor felt Lucas's hand tighten on her shoulder, felt her own tension drain away like water from a cracked dam. It's really over. It's really over, the deputy confirmed. Calloway's assets have been seized and auctioned to pay restitution to everyone he harmed. The smaller ranchers he forced out are getting compensation. His land is being broken up and sold. The territorial governor sent a personal message saying that men like Calloway have no place in the new West we're building. Justice, Lucas said quietly. Actual, real justice. I wasn't sure we'd see it. My uncle made sure of it. He doesn't like bullies, and Calloway was the worst kind, the kind with enough money to think he was above the law. But money can't buy your way out of kidnapping and attempted murder, not when there are a dozen witnesses and a federal marshal who's personally offended. The deputy tipped his hat. Congratulations to you both. And I hear there are more congratulations in order. Word is you're expecting. How did you Eleanor started, then laughed. Mrs. Chen, she can't keep a secret to save her life. Small communities, but the deputy said with a grin. News travels fast. Anyway, I'll let you get back to your preparations. Heard you're having quite the celebration tonight. After the deputy left, Eleanor turned to Lucas and saw her own relief reflected in his eyes. He's really gone. Calloway can't hurt us anymore. Can't hurt anyone anymore. He's gone, Lucas confirmed, and we can finally close that chapter completely. No more looking over our shoulders, no more wondering if he'll find a way to cause trouble from prison. It's finished. Eleanor took a deep breath of clean mountain air and felt something that had been tight in her chest for over a year finally release. Then let's celebrate. Not just our anniversary, but our freedom, our future, everything we've built and everything still to come. The afternoon was spent in joyful preparation. Tom and Jim strung lanterns across the ranch yard, and the new barn built in the months after Calloway's arrest, bigger and better than the one that had burned. Mrs. Chen supervised cooking that involved half the kitchen staff and more food than seemed possible for one celebration. Danny and Frank, who'd both grown into capable young men, helped arrange tables and chairs borrowed from neighbors. Eleanor walked through it all in a happy daze, occasionally pausing to rest her hand on her still flat stomach and think about the life growing there. A baby. Their baby. A child who would grow up in this place, who would learn to ride before they could read, who would know only security and love, and the kind of home Eleanor and Lucas had built from desperation and determination. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the guests began arriving. The neighboring ranchers came with their families, the Hendersons, who'd lost fences to Calloway's sabotage and had helped document his crimes. The Yamamotos, who ran sheep instead of cattle and had been ostracized by other ranchers until Eleanor had welcomed them as equals. Old Bill Martinez, who'd known Thomas Wade and had stories about Eleanor's father that made her laugh and cry at the same time. Howard Chen arrived with his family, including a grandson who immediately attached himself to Danny and began asking 1,000 questions about ranching. Marshall Reeves came from Denver with his wife, a formidable woman who took one look at Eleanor and said, "You're pregnant. Don't deny it. I can always tell. Congratulations, my dear." As the yard filled with people and music and laughter, Eleanor found herself standing at the edge of the celebration just watching. This was what she'd fought for, she realized. Not just the land or the buildings or even the financial security. She'd fought for this community connection, a place where people belonged to each other and looked out for one another. Lucas appeared at her side with 2 cups of lemonade. "You all right?" "Look pensive." "I'm perfect, just thinking about how far we've come." Eleanor took the cup and smiled at him. "A year ago tonight we were married in a kitchen with mud on our boots and fear in our hearts. Now we're here surrounded by friends celebrating everything we've built. It's almost too much to take in." "And we're just getting started," Lucas said. "Wait until the baby arrives. Then things will really get interesting." "Terrifying, you mean?" "That too, but we'll figure it out together, same as we've figured out everything else." Lucas set down his cup and held out his hand. "Dance with me." "They're playing our song," Eleanor listened and realized Pete's fiddle was playing the same tune that had played at their impromptu wedding celebration all those months ago. "We have a song, but we do now. Come on, Mrs. Rourke, dance with your husband." They moved to the center of the yard where other couples were already dancing. Lucas took Eleanor in his arms, careful of her condition, even though she'd told him 1,000 times that pregnant women didn't break, and they swayed to the music under the Colorado stars. "I love you," Eleanor said. "I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," Lucas replied. "You're my home, Eleanor. You and this ranch and the family we're building. Everything I spent 12 years running from, I found here with you, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it, even the hard parts, because they led me to this." They danced through several songs, and Eleanor felt herself relaxing into the music, into Lucas's arms, into the joy of the moment. Other couples joined them, Marshall Reeves and his wife, Old Pete, surprising everyone by asking Mrs. Chen to dance even young Danny, working up the courage to ask the Hendersons' daughter, a pretty girl named Sarah, who'd been making eyes at him all evening. As the night deepened, Tom Bridges called for attention. The music stopped, and people gathered around cups in hand, faces lit by lantern light. "Friends, neighbors, family," Tom began, his voice carrying easily in the quiet. "We're here tonight to celebrate Lucas and Eleanor Rourke's first anniversary, but we're also celebrating something bigger, the survival and triumph of Wade Ranch and the community that formed around the fight to save it." There was applause, and Eleanor felt her face heat with embarrassment and pride. Tom continued, "A year ago, this ranch was on the edge of ruin. A good man had died, his daughter was drowning in debt, and a corrupt cattle baron was doing everything in his power to steal what wasn't his. But Eleanor Rourke refused to surrender. And when Lucas Rourke showed up looking for work, something clicked. Together, they not only saved this ranch, but helped bring down a criminal operation that had been poisoning our community for years." More applause, louder this time. Eleanor saw several neighbors nodding vigorously. "But more than that, so," Tom said, "they showed us what community means. They brought us together, ranchers who'd been isolated and suspicious of each other. They proved that we're stronger together than apart. And they did it with courage, determination, and a love story that gives hope to every person who's ever felt lost and alone." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. Lucas squeezed her hand. "So please join me in raising a glass to Lucas and Eleanor Rourke. May their love continue to grow, may their ranch prosper, may their family." Tom winked clearly in on the pregnancy secret. "Expand in all the ways that matter. And may we all be reminded that sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance on a stranger who shows up looking for work." To Lucas and Eleanor. The crowd chorused and cups were raised in the lantern light. Marshall Reeves stepped forward next. "I'd like to add something, if I may. In my years of law enforcement, I've seen a lot of bad men get away with terrible things because good people were too afraid or too isolated to stand up to them. What Eleanor and Lucas did, documenting evidence, building a case, standing firm in the face of threats and violence, that's what justice requires. They could have run. They could have surrendered. Instead, they fought and they won, and they made this territory safer for everyone. That deserves recognition." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "The territorial governor asked me to present this officially. It's a citation for civic courage awarded to both of you for your actions in bringing Arthur Calloway to justice. There's also a small reward, $500 from the Territorial Fund for information leading to the conviction of major criminals." Eleanor gasped. $500 was a significant sum, enough to stock the ranch for winter with money left over. Lucas looked equally stunned. "We were just doing what was right," Eleanor managed to say. "Exactly," Marshall Reeves replied. "Which is why you deserve recognition. Most people don't do what's right when it's hard. You did. That matters." The celebration continued long into the night. There was dancing and eating and storytelling, and somewhere around midnight, Eleanor found herself sitting on the porch steps with Lucas, watching their friends and neighbors continue the party. "This is what community looks like," she said softly. "This is what we were fighting for all along, even if we didn't know it at the time." "Your father would be proud," Lucas said. "Not just of the ranch, though that too, but of this, the way you've brought people together, built something bigger than just one family's success. Eleanor thought about her father, about the lessons he'd taught her, the values he'd instilled. He used to say that land was only as valuable as the people who worked it and lived on it. I thought he meant cattle and crops, but I think he meant this: the relationships, the community, the way we take care of each other. Wise man. He was. Eleanor leaned her head on Lucas's shoulder. I wish he could have met you. I think you two would have gotten along. I wish I could have met him too. Asked his blessing to marry his daughter, done things properly. Lucas was quiet for a moment. My father sent a letter last month. I never told you because I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Eleanor sat up straight. Your father. The one who disowned you. The same. Apparently word reached Texas about what happened here, the fight with Calloway, the trial, all of it. He wrote to say he was wrong, that I'd become the kind of man he'd hoped to raise, just not in the way he'd planned. He asked if he could visit Meet. You see the life I'd built. What did you say? I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to tell him it's too late, that he doesn't get to be proud now after abandoning me when I was 14. But another part, Lucas's voice caught. Another part remembers being a scared kid who just wanted his father's approval. And I keep thinking about our baby, about how I never want them to feel that kind of rejection, and maybe the way to ensure that is to break the cycle, to forgive even when it's hard. Eleanor took his hand. Whatever you decide, I support you. If you want to invite him, he's welcome here. If you never want to see him again, I understand that too. But Lucas, you're going to be an amazing father. Not because of what your father did or didn't teach you, but because of who you are. Kind, patient, strong, gentle. Our baby is going to be so loved. Our baby is going to have the best mother in the world, Lucas replied. A woman who faces down cattle barons and saves ranches and builds communities. A woman who's brave enough to ask a drifter cowboy to marry her in the middle of a crisis. A woman I love more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. They kissed under the stars while the party continued around them, and Eleanor felt a completeness she'd never experienced before. This was home. This was family. This was everything. As the celebration finally began to wind down in the early hours of the morning, Mrs. Chen appeared with a knowing smile. Time for you two to get some rest. Pregnant women need their sleep, and you have a big day tomorrow. We do, Eleanor asked. The Johnsons are arriving to look at breeding stock. And the Chens, my cousins from San Francisco, are interested in investment opportunities. And there's that meeting about the irrigation cooperative. Did you forget? Eleanor had forgotten. The success of Wade Ranch had attracted attention, and now other ranchers wanted to learn from their methods, form partnerships, invest in shared resources. It was overwhelming and exciting and meant that the work was never really done. I didn't forget, she lied. I was just celebrating your anniversary and forgetting about work for one night, Mrs. Chen finished. As you should. But tomorrow, back to business. Ranch doesn't run itself. Yes, ma'am, Eleanor said meekly, and Lucas hid a smile. They said goodnight to the last lingering guests and finally made their way upstairs to their bedroom. Eleanor was exhausted, but happy, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from a day well spent. She changed into her nightgown while Lucas checked the windows and doors, a habit he'd never quite broken, despite the fact that they were safe now. Lucas, Eleanor said as she climbed into bed, tell me about your dream for the future. Not the practical stuff, the irrigation cooperative and the breeding programs and all that. The real dream. What do you see when you think about our life 5 years from now? 10 years from now? Lucas joined her in bed, pulling her close. I see this house full of children, maybe 3 or 4 if we're lucky. I see the ranch thriving with new buildings and healthy herds and good people working land they care about. I see us sitting on the porch when we're old, watching our grandchildren play in the yard, telling them stories about the year we fought a cattle baron and won. I see that too, Eleanor whispered. And I see us still in love, still partners, still facing every challenge together the way we have from the beginning. Always, well, Lucas promised. Through every sunrise and storm. That's what marriage means, right? Choosing each other every single day. Every single day, Eleanor agreed. They fell asleep holding each other, and Eleanor dreamed of the future they were building, a future with children and prosperity and love that would last generations. She dreamed of teaching her daughter to ride, of watching Lucas teach their son to rope cattle, of family dinners filled with laughter and arguments, and the beautiful chaos of a life well lived. The months that followed their anniversary were busy but joyful. The irrigation cooperative formed pooling resources from 6 neighboring ranches to build a system that would protect everyone from drought. The breeding program expanded, with Wade Ranch becoming known for quality stock throughout the territory. And Eleanor's pregnancy progressed, her belly growing round while Lucas hovered like a nervous mother hen. "I'm fine," Eleanor told him for the 1,000th time in early December when he tried to stop her from walking out to check on the winter feed storage. "Pregnant women don't break. My mother worked until the day she went into labor with me. Your mother was remarkable. You're remarkable. But you're also carrying my child, and I reserve the right to be overprotective." Lucas helped her into her coat despite her protests. "At least let me walk with you. The ground is icy." Eleanor gave up arguing and let him fuss. Truth be told, she loved his protectiveness, even when it was excessive. The men he cared meant he was already being the father she knew he'd be attentive, concerned, all in. In January, Lucas finally responded to his father's letter. Eleanor never read what he wrote, but she saw the peace on his face after he sealed the envelope and rode to town to mail it. Whatever he'd said, it had given him closure, and that was all that mattered. "I told him he could visit in the spring," Lucas said that night. "After the baby comes, when things are settled. I told him I forgave him, but I also told him what kind of father I planned to be, present, supportive, accepting of my children's choices, even when they're different from what I'd choose. I don't know if we'll ever be close, but maybe we can build something new." "That's brave," Eleanor said. "Forgiveness always is. You taught me that. You forgave me for all those weeks of keeping secrets about my past, about being afraid to let you in. If you can forgive my cowardice, I can forgive his mistakes." "You were never a coward," Eleanor said firmly. "Cautious, maybe. Protecting yourself because you'd been hurt before, but never a coward. A coward wouldn't have run into a burning barn. A coward wouldn't have stepped in front of a bullet meant for me." Lucas pulled her close, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "And you're the bravest person I know, facing down Calloway, saving the ranch, building this community. Now you're about to do the bravest thing of all, bring new life into the world." The baby arrived on a cold February morning when snow lay thick on the ground and the world was hushed and white. Eleanor's labor was long and difficult, but Mrs. Chen proved as skilled at midwifery as she'd claimed. Lucas stayed by Eleanor's side through all of it, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave even when Mrs. Chen suggested he might be more comfortable waiting downstairs. "I'm not leaving," Lucas said firmly. "We're partners. We face everything together. That includes this." And when their daughter finally arrived, small and red and furiously angry at being born into the cold world, Lucas cried. He held that tiny person in his big scarred hands and cried like his heart was breaking, except Eleanor knew it wasn't breaking. It was expanding, making room for a love so big it couldn't be contained. "She's perfect," Lucas whispered. "Eleanor, she's absolutely perfect." "She is," Eleanor agreed, exhausted but euphoric. "What should we call her?" They'd discussed names for months, but never settled on one. Now looking at their daughter's tiny face, Lucas said, "Grace, for the grace that brought us together, saved the ranch, gave us this life. Grace Wade Rourke." "Grace," Eleanor repeated, and it felt right. "Hello, Gracie. Welcome home." The weeks after Grace's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant wonder. Eleanor had never known exhaustion like this, but she'd also never known love like this, the all-consuming, terrifying, beautiful love of a parent for a child. And watching Lucas with their daughter was almost as overwhelming as Grace herself. He was natural with her, patient with her crying, gentle with her fragile body, completely besotted with every tiny sound and movement she made. "You're going to spoil her," Eleanor said one evening, finding Lucas holding their sleeping daughter and just staring at her face. "Probably," Lucas admitted without shame. "But look at her, Eleanor. We made this perfect person. How am I supposed to not spoil her?" Fair point. As spring arrived and the world turned green again, life at Wade Ranch settled into a new rhythm. Eleanor gradually returned to ranch management, though now she wore Grace in a sling while checking stock and meeting with hands. Lucas somehow managed to do his job while also being a devoted father, often carrying Grace out to the stables to introduce her to the horses. "She's going to grow up thinking she's part horse," Eleanor teased. "Worse fates," Lucas replied. "At least horses are honest and hard-working, good role models." In April, Lucas's father arrived. John Rourke was a tall man in his 60s, weathered and gray, and the resemblance to Lucas was striking. Eleanor watched the two men face each other in the ranch yard, saw the tension, the hope, the fear of rejection on both sides. Then John Rourke said, "Son, I'm sorry for everything. For being too proud and too stubborn to see that you needed to find your own path. For wasting years we could have spent knowing each other. For not being the father you deserved." Lucas stood very still for a moment. Then he stepped forward and embraced his father, and Eleanor saw both men's shoulders shake with emotion. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas said, "I'd like you to meet your granddaughter." He brought Grace out, and Eleanor watched as John Rourke's gruff exterior crumbled at the sight of the baby. "She has your mother's eyes," he whispered. "Same blue." "My God, Lucas, she's beautiful." "She is," Lucas agreed. "And there's someone else you should meet. Eleanor, come here. Dad, this is my wife, Eleanor. Eleanor, my father, John." Eleanor shook John's hand and saw him taking in the ranch, the well-maintained buildings, the healthy stock, and the pastures. "You've built something good here," John said. "Both of you. I'm proud of you, son." "I know I have no right to say that after everything, but I am." "Thank you," Lucas said simply. "That means more than you know." John stayed for a week, and by the time he left, Eleanor could see the beginnings of healing between father and son. They'd never be as close as they might have been if John hadn't driven Lucas away all those years ago, but they were building something new, cautious, honest, real. "Thank you," Lucas said to Eleanor the night after John left, "for welcoming him here, for giving us a chance to mend what was broken." "Family is complicated," Eleanor replied, "but it's also precious. I lost my parents too young. If you have a chance to rebuild something with your father, I want that for you, for us, for Grace." Summer returned with its heat and long days, and the ranch hummed with activity. The breeding program was so successful, they had to hire 2 more hands just to manage the increased herd. The irrigation cooperative transformed the valley, ensuring that even in drought years, the ranches would survive. And Wade Ranch became a gathering place, a center of community, exactly as Eleanor had envisioned. On a warm evening in late July, Eleanor and Lucas found themselves once again on the porch watching the sunset. Grace was asleep in her cradle nearby, and the sounds of the ranch settling for the night were familiar and comforting. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Eleanor asked. "If you'd walked away that first day, if I'd given up and married Calloway, if we'd made different choices." "All the time," Lucas admitted. "And I'm grateful every single day that we made the choices we did. That I took a chance on a desperate ranch owner, that you took a chance on a drifter cowboy, that we fought for this instead of surrendering to fear." Eleanor looked out over the land her father had loved, the land she'd nearly lost, the land that was now thriving beyond anything she'd imagined possible. The main barn stood tall and strong. The fences were straight and secure. Cattle grazed in green pastures, and in the distance she could see the lights of neighboring ranches, the community that had formed around shared struggle and mutual support. "We did it," she said softly. "We saved the ranch. We built a life. We created something that will last generations." "We did," Lucas agreed. He reached over and took her hand, threading his scarred fingers through hers. "And we're just getting started. Grace will grow up here, maybe have brothers and sisters. They'll learn to ride these hills, tend these cattle, love this land the way we do. And someday when we're old and gray, we'll sit on this porch and watch our grandchildren play, and we'll tell them the story of how it all began. The story of the ranch heiress who hired a poor cowboy," Eleanor said with a smile. "And never expected to fall in love," Lucas finished. "Though how you didn't expect it, I'll never know. I'm exceptionally lovable." Eleanor laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet evening. "You are. Humble, too. One of my best qualities." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Grace sleeping peacefully, the ranch peaceful around them. Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought her here, the desperation and fear, the courage and determination, the love that had saved not just the ranch, but her very soul. She thought about Lucas showing up at her door that March morning, a stranger with nothing but his word and his skills. She thought about how that stranger had become her partner, her love, her home. And she thought about the future stretching before them, full of promise and possibility. More children, more challenges, more triumphs, more of the quiet, beautiful moments like this one where everything felt absolutely right. "Lucas," she said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For showing up, for staying, for believing we could do this, for loving me even when I was too scared to admit I loved you back, for being the partner I needed, the husband I dreamed of, the father our daughter deserves. For everything." Lucas lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter, for seeing past the surface to who I could be, for making me want to stop running and start building, for giving me a home, a family, a purpose. You saved me, Eleanor, just as much as I helped save the ranch." "We saved each other," Eleanor corrected. "That's what love does. It saves us from ourselves, from our fears, from the loneliness we didn't even know we were carrying." Grace stirred in her sleep, making the small sounds that meant she'd wake soon and need feeding. But for now, for this perfect moment, Eleanor and Lucas sat together on the porch of Wade Ranch, holding hands, watching the stars emerge, and feeling the deep, abiding peace of people who'd fought for everything they had and won. The ranch was saved. The community was strong. The love was deep and true and would last a lifetime. And in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of Thomas Wade's voice carried on the wind saying what Eleanor already knew in her heart. "Well done, Ellie girl. Well done." The story of the ranch heiress who hired a drifter cowboy and found the man who'd save everything had reached its perfect ending. But really, Eleanor thought, as Lucas squeezed her hand and Grace began to wake, it wasn't an ending at all. It was just the beginning of everything that mattered. And that she realized with a heart full of gratitude and joy and love was the greatest gift of all.